subscribe, like the video, and, if possible, join Patreon. But if you don't have much money, you can support the channel by watching the novels on euroaudiobooks.com. Remember that you can participate in the polls so that your favorite novel gets published for free.
Maen could only shake his head and leave the captain's room. Anyway, he was reminded of the news. As for the final result, he could only wait and see. Maen felt that the pirate attack this time might not be simple. If it was those small pirates, it would be okay. Maen had specially learned about the Bloodhand pirates after seeing the news before. It was a pirate group that had been roaming the sea for nearly 10 years. Being able to rob on the sea for nearly 10 years without being caught by the Alliance. This pirate group was definitely not crazy to rob SS, and they must have made a plan and dared to rob SS. And however, Maen did not intend to sit and wait for death. After leaving a message to his grandmother, Agatha Elite, Maen returned to the room, ready to fight at any time. In the sea far away from SS, and several pirate ships turned off their lights and hung far behind SS. And Red Hand Jack stepped on the deck, looking at the SS and in the distance, with greed in his eyes completely undisguised. "Boss, half an hour ago, there was no news from the brothers lurking on the ship. I'm afraid they were caught by the sailors on the ship." At this time, the first mate of the pirate group came to Jack and said to Jack quickly. Jack frowned when he heard the first mate's words, then sneered a few times and said slowly in a hoarse voice, "I didn't expect the sailors on the ship to have such good eyesight. I thought these guys were used to comfort, but it doesn't matter. Anyway, the list has been almost obtained. Tell the people below to prepare for action. After all, the guys on the ship have already had some suspicions." "Yes, Captain." The first mate saluted excitedly and then called for his men to assemble loudly. The crew below was obviously prepared for a long time. After the first mate announced the assembly, all the members assembled in less than 2 minutes and looked at Captain Jack standing on the bow with excitement on their faces. Captain Jack turned around and saw the greedy and excited eyes of his men. He grinned and shouted loudly, "Guys, the chance to make a fortune is today. As long as we rob the SS in this time, we can enjoy it in the future. The captains of each team will send you the list in my hand. Now go full speed, target SS in." "Yes, Captain." Jack looked at the enthusiastic brothers below, stood at the bow again, flipped the list in his hand against the sea breeze, and Maen's name and photo were listed. In the room, Maen put the pockball in the most convenient place and asked Jengar to be alert in his shadow, and then stood in front of the French window to look at the scenery on the sea. In the night, the sea outside the window looked calm, but Maen knew that this was just the calm before the hurricane rain. With Maen's reminder and the capture of 3 pirates, Captain Bill had already ordered his sailors to be alert, so there were already people on guard in the watchtower. When the ship of the Bloody Hand pirates approached, it was naturally discovered by the sailors. Seeing that there were really pirates attacking, the people in the watchtower immediately raised the alarm, and the alarm sounded throughout the SS in an instant. In addition to the alarm, there was also Captain Bill's voice on the radio. "All tourists on the SS, and please return to your rooms immediately. Don't panic. Our SS and sailors will protect your safety." The tourists on the ship immediately ran in panic when they heard Captain Bill's words, pushing and shoving back to their rooms. While the tourists were pushing and shoving to escape, Bill led the sailors on the ship to be on guard on the deck after the broadcast. When Bill and others arrived, the ship of the Bloody Hand pirates had already arrived under the SS, and then they skillfully launched the grappling hook and began to move towards the deck. When Bill saw the grappling hook hooked on the railing of the deck, he commanded the sailors and their Pokémon to attack the grappling hook with skills. But just as the sailors were about to attack, 2 Pokeballs suddenly fell from soaring in the sky, and then a Feraligatr and a Sharpedo appeared on the deck. The strength of the 2 Pokémon was surprisingly gym level. Feraligatr Blizzard, Sharpedo Hail. In soaring in the sky, Captain Jack, riding a Fiero, had arrived on the deck sky at some point, and then commanded the Pokémon to release skills. Blizzard and Hail attacked the sailors and their Pokémon on the ship. Captain Bill reacted quickly and released his Pokémon, a gym-level Swampert, while shouting, "Icy Wind! Block it!" Swampert's abdomen bulged, and then he spit out icy wind with white crystals, blocking the attacks of Feraligatr and Sharpedo. However, Captain Bill's face was very ugly because he knew that Jack's Pokemon had no intention of defeating the sailors present. After all, no matter how strong Jack was, he couldn't fight dozens of people alone. Brother Jack's purpose was just to delay time, because when he and Bill's Pokemon were fighting, the pirates who had climbed the grappling rope had already turned over from the guardrail and stood on the deck with a grim smile. Chapter 46: Fierce Fight on Deck SS. And the night was filled with soaring in the sky. Under the lights on the deck of SS, and the sailors of the bloody pirates and SS and stood on each side, looking at each other vigilantly. Captain Bill, long time no see. I didn't expect you to welcome me so warmly. Bloody Jack landed from Firo, stepped on the deck, and said to Bill opposite with a smile. Jack, I didn't expect you to be so bold and dare to take the SS, and aren't you afraid that the Alliance will cause trouble for you? What's wrong with SSN? Isn't it a ship sailing on the sea? Since it's a ship, there's nothing I can't rob. You're so arrogant, Jack. Aren't you afraid that the sea breeze will flicker your tongue? Is your confidence given by your newly recovered Feraligatr? Bill looked at the two Pokemon under Jack's command opposite, and a solemn expression appeared on his face. Who knows? But don't think I don't know you're stalling for time, old man. I won't chat with you anymore. Guys, get started. Jack the Red Hand commanded his pirates to attack with a grim smile. Bill on the other side also commanded his sailors to fight back. The Pokemons of both sides began to fight on the deck, with various skills flying around on the deck. Although the battle looked very intense, everyone present knew that only Jack and Bill could influence the situation. The victory or defeat between them would determine the fate of everyone on the ship. The area around the 3 gym-level Pokemons fighting on the field had been cleared, and only 3 Pokemons were fighting fiercely on the field. Bill's Swampert gathered Ice Punch in his hand and hit Feraligatr. Feraligatr on the other side was not afraid and also fought back with Ice Punch. The fists of the 2 Pokemons collided in midair, and after a loud noise, they couldn't help but take a few steps back at the same time. While Swampert was still standing still, a Sharpedo waiting for an opportunity gathered evil energy in its mouth and bit Swampert's right arm with a Night Slash. Swampert's face immediately showed a painful expression, but the battle-hardened Swampert immediately endured the pain. His free left arm flashed white light, and an arm hammer hit Sharpedo's head, knocking Sharpedo to the ground. But before Swampert could catch his breath, the Feraligatr next to him had already come up and bit Swampert's shoulder with an Ice Fang. Swampert was in pain and became ferocious. He gathered energy in his mouth, and then an Ice Beam directly hit Feraligatr, who bit his shoulder, knocking Feraligatr out. The fierce power of the 3 Pokemon made people feel excited, but Bill's face became more and more ugly. Bill had already seen that Jack on the opposite side obviously did not intend to waste time with him, and used a tactic of exchanging injuries for injuries. With the advantage of numbers, his Swampert might not be able to hold out for long. The situation on the field was just as Captain Bill thought. Swampert's shoulders were covered with frost, and his right arm was also bleeding. The residual evil energy on his face made him very uncomfortable, and he stood on the ground, gasping for breath. Although Feraligatr and Sharpedo on the other side were also injured, they were much lighter than Swampert. Seeing Swampert's appearance, Jack's grim smile became more and more intense, and he continued to command Sharpedo and Feraligatr to attack. Sharpedo Crunch. Sharpedo's floating body rushed directly towards Swampert, and at the same time opened his huge mouth full of fangs. Swampert endured the pain and stretched out his arms to firmly grasp Sharpedo's upper and lower jaws, and stood in a stalemate with Sharpedo. Now, Feraligatr, destroy the Death Ray. Oops! Hearing Jack's command, Bill looked at Feraligatr on the other side in panic. Feraligatr's mouth was filled with energy, and the dazzling white light was particularly obvious at night, reflecting Jack's hideous face. Jengar, Shadow Ball. At this critical moment, a command came from behind Captain Bill, and a Jengar with a smirk suddenly appeared in the shadow under Feraligatr's feet, and at the same time, there was a Shadow Ball in Jengar's hand. Before everyone reacted, Jengar fired a Shadow Ball directly at Feraligatr's chin. The destructive death ray that was ready to go was directly held back, and an explosion sounded in Feraligattor's mouth. Feraligattor's body couldn't help but fall backwards under this force. From Feraligattor preparing to launch the destructive death beam, to Jengar's sneak attack, to Feraligattor himself falling to the ground, these things happened in just a few breaths. How is it possible? Jack looked in the direction of Jengar and couldn't hide the shock on his face. After all, anyone who was attacked when they were sure of victory would show this expression. In contrast to Jack's ugly expression, it was Captain Bill. When he saw Jengar suddenly appear, he instantly thought of Maen and couldn't help showing a relaxed look on his face and turn around to look over. Others present also looked in the direction of the sound, just now, and saw Maen in black clothes standing on the deck at some point. Jengar quickly returned to Maen after the sneak attack, and Maen slowly walked to Bill's side and stood with Bill. On the other side, Feraligattor, who was attacked by sneak attack, also slowly stood up from the ground at this time, and his trainer Jack Normal, his eyes were full of anger. Damn kid, wait. You are the kid who has Lapras. I didn't expect you to have such strength. Those intelligence officers are really idiots. They didn't get such important intelligence. Bill looked at Jack's ugly face, and his tense expression couldn't help but relax. He said to Jack slowly, "Jack, it's 2-2 now. You're doomed to lose." Jack's face was also a little ugly when he heard Bill's words, and then he looked at Maen, forced a smile on his face, and said, "Kid, I promise you, as long as you leave this fight now, I swear in the name of Bloody Jack that I will not cause trouble for you, and I will not touch your Pokemon. How about it? After all, it doesn't matter if we lack you as a target." Hearing Jack's words, everyone present looked at Maen, waiting for Maen's decision. Chapter 47. The Money-Giving Man of the Pokemon World. I refuse. Maen refused without hesitation after hearing what Red Jack said. Maen was not a fool. Let's not talk about whether this pirate had any credibility. If Maen did this, he would offend everyone on the ship. He still wanted to be an Alliance elite and a champion in the future. If he ran away directly, he would be in trouble. The most important thing was that Maen felt that if he really ran away, Grandma Agatha at home would definitely punish him. Hearing Maen's answer, Captain Bill and the sailors here breathed a sigh of relief. After all, the whole situation now depended on Maen's decision. Captain Bill also told Maen that he would report to Alliance after the incident and record his credit. Jack's expression on the other side was a little ugly. The current situation was completely different from just now. In the same 2-on-2 situation, he was not sure that he could win. If he could not win in a short time, when the Alliance arrived, his plan would fail. Gnashing his teeth, Red Hand Jack showed a rage on his face and shouted loudly at Soaring in the Sky. "How long do you want to see? Hurry up." Noticing Red Hand Jack's actions, Maen and Captain Bill all looked at Soaring in the Sky vigilantly. I saw a man in black clothes, a peak cap and sunglasses sitting on a Fiero at some point, quietly watching everything happening below. Hearing Jack's words, the man in black sneered and said, "At the beginning you said you only needed me to help you raid the formation, but now that you've asked me for it, the previous remuneration will be changed. I want the Pokemon on that kid, and I want 30% of the profit this time." "Hunter K, what do you mean? You're asking for a higher price." Jack showed a rage on his face when he heard Hunter K's words. It doesn't matter. I don't need to help you, but the price cannot be changed. Since you asked me for help, you have to pay me whether I do anything or not. If you don't, I'll pay you with your life. Anyway, your bounty in Alliance is not low." Maen listened to Hunter K's words and felt that they sounded familiar. Isn't this the Pokemon version of the money-giving guy? When Jack heard Hunter K's words, his expression was as if he had eaten SHI, but he still gritted his teeth and agreed to Hunter K's request. After seeing Jack agree, Hunter K sneered and fell from Fiero, and then locked Viper Normal's eyes on Maen. Maen looked at Hunter K and showed a vigilant look. When he heard Hunter K's name, Maen guessed that the other party was a Pokemon hunter. Hunter J, with Salamence in the anime, is this profession, and compared to the Pokemon hunter profession mentioned only in the anime, the Pokemon hunter in reality is a huge organization. If there is demand, there will naturally be people to buy and sell. In the Pokemon world, Pokemon is undoubtedly the most valuable commodity, so naturally the profession of Pokemon hunter appeared. Then, as the number of Pokemon hunters continued to increase, Pokemon hunters officially established an underground organization, which spanned all the Alliance regions and could be seen in any corner of the world. The Hunter K in front of Maen was one of the best. As mentioned before, in the Pokemon world, it is not easy for an ordinary person to train Pokemon to the elite level. Although the strength of Pokemon hunters is also uneven, those who can obtain letter numbers must meet at least one condition. That is, there is at least one gym-level Pokemon, and since Hunter K can obtain the code, it naturally proves that he has such strength. As Hunter K threw the Pokeball, a Beedrill and Ariados appeared on the deck, and the strength of the two Pokemon was surprisingly gym-level. Seeing Hunter K take action, Jack on the other side was relieved and then looked at Captain Bill fiercely. Now his goal is to quickly deal with Bill and then quickly deal with all the tourists on the ship and evacuate quickly. Hunter K looked at Maen with viper-normal eyes, then sneered and said, Ariados, string shot, target Jengar. Beedrill X Scissor, target that kid. The bottom line of Pokemon hunters is even lower than that of pirates. For these desperate people, as long as they can achieve their goals, any means don't matter. When catching Pokemon, burning the forest, or threatening with Pokemon's children, or using technological weapons, as long as they can think of means, they don't mind. An attacking Pokemon trainer is a must for them. After all, this is the most effective way to attack the strength of Pokemon. Ariados quickly spewed out white and sticky spider silk from his mouth, forming a web in the air and covering Jengar. Facing the flying spider web, Jengar directly used Will-O-Wisp to burn the spider silk. But Hunter K's original goal was to delay more, and his biggest killer move was Beedrill, who rushed towards Maen. Ariados delayed, and Beedrill used high speed to directly attack the opposite trainer. This combination Hunter K has tried and tested. On the other side, Maen looked at Beedrill, who was rushing directly at him, and his face changed slightly. He quickly pressed down the hand that had been on his waist Pokeball. Dano came out of the Pokeball, condensed evil energy in his mouth, and bit Beedrill directly. Beedrill was stunned when he saw Dano suddenly appear, but still turned around and dodged with his quick reaction speed. In the end, Dano's mouth and Beedrill's body just brushed past each other. Although Dano's sneak attack was successful, it only brushed Beedrill's body and did not cause great damage. It's Dano, you little brat, actually has this kind of Pokemon. Hunter K saw Dano next to Maen, and the greed in his eyes was completely unconcealed, and the smile on his face could not be controlled at all. Even Bloody Jack next to him showed a shocked expression on his face, and then he regretted agreeing to Hunter K's request to take away all of Maen's Pokemon. But now is obviously not the time for him to be distracted. He must quickly deal with Captain Bill, so that even without Dano, the Pokemon and money of other tourists on the ship will be enough to make up for him. Chapter 48. Fighting Hunter K. I'm so lucky today. I got a Jengar, a Lapras, and a Quasigod Dano. My lineup is now complete. I have to thank you, kid. I'll see how Hunter J shows off her Bagon in front of me. Hunter K's tone was full of joy, and he seemed to have already determined that he would win against Maen. After all, in his opinion, although Maen was a kid with some strength, he was still far behind a battle-hardened Pokemon hunter like him. The most important thing is that experienced hunters like Hunter K can roughly judge the strength of Pokemon. When Maen's Dano appeared, he was sure that Dano was definitely not at the gym level. Hunter K's Beedrill is a genuine gym level, and the difference in strength can completely ignore the difference between Quasi-Celestic and ordinary Pokemon. As for the other Jengar, Hunter K naturally has a way to deal with it. Just use Ariados to hold it back. As long as Maen, the trainer, falls, the Jengar will naturally be a failure. Ariados, use Sticky Web to hold that Jengar. Beedrill Agility. Accompanying Hunter K's command, Ariados spit out a large amount of spider web again. This time, it was not the spider web used for capturing before, but more of a spider web spread directly on the ground to make it difficult for Jengar to move. If it was the Haunter before evolution, it could naturally ignore the field skills, such as Sticky Web through the floating ability, but the Jengar ability after evolution became the curse body. The opposing Hunter K obviously knew something about Pokemon like Jengar. Beedrill on the other side was flashing white light all over his body, and after the white light, the vibration frequency of the wings behind him became faster, and it was obvious that the speed had been further improved. Jengar, Will-O-Wisp, burn those spiderwebs. Dano, work up. Maen also took countermeasures. Now, because of the difference in strength between Dano and Beedrill, he had to be cautious. Maen did not intend to do it himself. After all, he was also a special ability user, but Dano stopped Maen and planned to rely on his own strength to fight Beedrill. Maen looked at Dano's firm eyes and did not refuse. Anyway, he would do it when he really had to. Ariados, Poison Barb interfere with that Jengar. Beedrill, Fury Attack. Ariados spit out a flying needle with venom from its mouth and shot it in the direction of Jengar. Jengar had to give up the use of Will-O-Wisp and avoid Poison Barb's attack instead. Beedrill, who was the main attacker, rushed to Dano like a meteor with the blessing of agility and stabbed Dano with his arms like a knight's gun. Facing Beedrill's speed, Dano had no way to dodge and was directly cut by Beedrill's twine needle, uttering a painful groan. The ferocious Dano did not hesitate and spit out dragon breath directly while bearing Beedrill's attack. However, Beedrill's speed made it completely comfortable to face Dano's attack and easily avoided Dragon Breath's attack. After seeing the round of fighting between Beedrill and Dano, Hunter K's expression on his face became more relaxed, grinning and saying, Beedrill, Fury Cutter. Dano, protect. Beedrill's twine needle flashed white light and slashed directly towards Dano. Fortunately, Maen commanded in time, and the light film in front of Dano directly blocked the attack. Hunter K's face was a little ugly after failing to hit the target, but he was not in a hurry because he knew that although Protect was useful, it did not mean that it would always be effective. He did not believe that Maen's Dano could succeed every time. Bidu, Peen Me Sai. Don't give Dano a chance to breathe. Dano, Draco Meteor. Maen didn't let Dano use Protect anymore because Protect didn't have a 100% success rate. If he kept using it, it would eventually break. He could only suppress Beedrill with a counterattack. After all, although Beedrill is fast and has high attack, it has the disadvantage of most bug-type Pokemon, which is that its defense is too poor. Even if there is a difference in strength, as long as Dano can attack once, Beedrill will inevitably be affected by the injury. The pin missile hit Dano directly. Despite the pain, Dano still insisted on gathering energy and spitting out a Draco Meteor directly into the air. Draco Meteor fell like a fairy soaring in the sky and smashed directly in the direction of Beedrill. This kind of intensive attack, even if Beedrill is fast, it is impossible to dodge all of them, but Hunter K obviously has a way to deal with it. Beedrill, substitute. Beedrill faced the Draco Meteor that's soaring in the sky, smashed down, and the energy on his body surged. Then a Beedrill with a dull look appeared in the same place, and Beedrill's body hid behind substitute. As the Draco Meteor fell, continuous explosions instantly appeared on the deck. If it weren't for the special material of the deck of SS, and the normal ship would have been pierced by the Draco Meteor. As the smoke dissipated, although Beedrill's breath was a little messy, substitute still helped it block the damage of Draco Meteor. Kid, the idea is good, but the gap is still too big. Isn't it better to die obediently? Hunter K's mocking tone was not concealed at all. Although substitute consumed a lot of Beedrill's physical strength, Dano, who had used Draco Meteor, was in a worse condition than Beedrill. Beedrill, sword dance. Then the X-Scissor ends. Beedrill danced in the air with a special rhythm, and then a ray of light flashed from his body, and then Twine Needle began to shine, and after flying in front of Dano, he drew a cross in the air and attacked Dano. Dano, protect. Dano quickly gathered barrier in front of him and forcibly blocked the X-Scissor. But the barrier only lasted for a while, and after blocking the attack of X-Scissor, it broke, and Dano's body could not help but be blown away by the impact of the attack and fell to the ground. Chapter 49, Zweilous. Maen looked at Dano, and the dark power in his body began to surge, intending to help Dano fight together. Dano, who was lying on the ground, stopped Maen's action, struggled to stand up from the ground, raised his head, and roared loudly at soaring in the sky. Roar! A roar growl came out of Dano's mouth, and everyone on the deck felt the pressure from the dragon Pokemon. After the roar, Dano's body began to emit a dazzling white light in the night. This white light is the light of evolution. Under the cover of the white light, Dano's body began to change constantly. On the other side, after seeing Dano evolve, the expression on Hunter K's face became a little ugly. In the middle of Spark Flint, Hunter K made a decision: interrupt Dano's evolution. Hunter K knew that if Dano completed the evolution, not only would his physical strength be greatly restored, but his strength would also change qualitatively. At that time, Beedrill, who wanted to rely on continuous attacks to consume most of his physical strength, would be in trouble. So even if interrupting Dano's evolution will affect Dano's future qualifications, Hunter K cannot hesitate. After all, what is in hand first is good. As long as Maen is defeated, it doesn't matter if Dano is injured. At most, it will take more time to heal. This is also the difference between these busybodies in the wild and normal trainers. If it is a normal trainer, even in the middle of a battle, as long as one party's Pokemon is about to evolve, the other party will patiently wait for the other party to evolve before fighting. But Hunter K is obviously not this kind of person. They only pursue the final result and don't care about other things at all. Beedrill, Pin Missile interrupts Dano's evolution. Beedrill heard Hunter K's command, and Twineedle condensed energy again and flashed white light, ready to attack Dano in front of him. At this moment, a Shadow Ball flew directly from the side of Beedrill. Feeling the threat of Shadow Ball, Beedrill quickly released Pin Missile stockpile and hurriedly dodged the attack of Shadow Ball this time. Hunter K also hurriedly looked in the direction of the Shadow Ball and saw that Jengar still had a sly smile on his face. It was obvious that the previous Shadow Ball was launched by Jengar, and the price was an attack from Ariados. However, for Jengar, its goal had been achieved. Although it was injured, the smile on its face could not be concealed. Hunter K's face was also very ugly. He did not expect that his delaying tactics were used by the opponent, and the situation in the next battle was really changed. Because the evolutionary light on Dano had ended, and it officially evolved into Zweilous. Compared with the previous Dano, Zweilous' body was several times larger, and it changed from a single head to a double head, and a pair of wings grew behind it. Its strength has directly reached the gym level. Roar! The two heads of the evolved Zweilous roared loudly at soaring in the sky, venting the anger in his heart. Maen saw the surprise on Zweilous' face after the evolution and did not hide it. Then he commanded loudly, "Let them see your strength after the evolution. Zweilous, use Draco Meteor." After hearing Maen's command, Zweilous directly put his two heads together, opened his mouth together to gather strength, and then spewed out a Draco Meteor that was more dazzling and huge than before. This time the target not only includes Beedrill in the venue, but also Ariados, who had previously delayed Jengar and consumed a lot of energy. After the evolution, Zweilous Draco Meteor is not only larger in size and wider in range, but also naturally terrifying in terms of power. Beedrill, who has no energy to use Substitute, and Ariados on the other side, can only watch the Draco Meteor fall. No! With a heart-wrenching cry from Hunter K, the Draco Meteor hit the deck directly. The roar and explosion sounded continuously. After the smoke and dust cleared, the deck failed to withstand the power of Draco Meteor and became pitted and covered with burnt marks. Beedrill and Ariados, who were at the center of the explosion, fell to the ground, with burnt marks all over their bodies, and their breath was extremely weak. They lay on the ground, motionless. Hunter K stared at Maen with his red eyes, as if he wanted to cut Maen into pieces. Remembering Maen's face, Hunter K quickly took back the two Pokemon, then turned on Fiero and planned to escape from here. But Hunter K, who had just taken off and was about to say a few harsh words, felt a chill on his back, and all the hair on his body stood up. Turning around slightly, he saw Jengar coming behind him at some point, grinning at Hunter K. Then Hunter K's body softened directly on Fiero, and Fiero, who found Jengar, instinctively planned to escape. But it was just a Pokemon that Hunter K usually used to chase and escape. Its speed was okay, but its strength was not good enough. Before it could speed up, it was directly hit by a Shadow Ball from Jengar, and Hunter K's body fell onto the deck. As Hunter K was defeated, the expressions on the faces of Bloody Jack and Captain Bill next to him turned into two polar opposites. Bloody Jack knew that this operation was completely over, and he hated Hunter K, the waste, in his heart. With such a big advantage, he couldn't even get rid of a little ghost and was killed by someone. He looked at Swampert, who was already covered in wounds in front of Bill with hatred. In another minute, he could get rid of this old thing Bill. But in the current situation, he could only grit his teeth and give up because the pirates on his side had completely lost their morale. After all, compared with the formally trained sailors, they were a mob after all. He could still fight when he had an advantage before, but his morale plummeted after seeing Hunter K's failure, and he was suppressed to the guardrail by the high-spirited sailors. The Zweilous on the Maen side had already approached, and Jack knew that if he didn't leave now, he would never be able to leave. Sharpedo, Bubble attack, that's Zweilous. Feraligatr, Blizzard attack the sailor over there. After giving the order, Jack stepped on Fiero first, ready to evacuate the scene immediately. Chapter 50 Hoenn Elite Drake Sharpedo's spit up Hydro Pump hit Zweilous, and Zweilous used Dragon Breath to block the flying Hydro Pump. On the other side, Captain Bill saw that Jack actually ordered Feraligatr to attack his sailors with skills, and directly ordered Swampert to protect the safety of the sailors. Jack's purpose was obviously the same, to delay Zweilous' encirclement and attract Swampert's attention, so that he could take this opportunity to successfully escape. After all, Jack also saw in a previous battle that neither Maen nor Bill had any flying Pokemon, and Hunter K was smacked down just because he didn't notice Jengar's location. After making this plan, Jack has been paying attention to Jengar's location, and found that Jengar was still with Hunter K, so he felt relieved to use this trick. Fiero had already flown into the air, and Jack took this opportunity to retrieve his two Pokemon and directly ordered Fiero to take off at full speed to escape. The pirates below saw the action of their boss and immediately spewed out all kinds of obscene words. They didn't expect that the boss they always respected would betray them and choose to escape alone. This is the difference between the pirates and Bill's sailors. Bill and the sailors have families. While helping each other, they also trust each other's backs. Even if they die, their families can be taken care of. But Jack's side is different. It was originally a group of desperate people gathered together. In Jack's eyes, his brothers are just tools. When he hides for a while, he can pull up another team with his strength. He is still the Bloody Jack who makes people terrified. Just when Jack, who was full of confidence, thought he had escaped successfully, Fiero under him suddenly stopped moving, just stopped in the air, and his body kept shaking, looking at the distance with horror. Fiero, what are you doing? Fly. Jack patted Fiero's body hard, urging Fiero to fly away quickly. Jack's strangeness also attracted the attention of people on the deck. Maen also looked at Jack curiously. It can't move because it is afraid and dare not continue to fly. As for the one who is afraid, it should be me. A steady voice sounded, and everyone looked in the direction of the voice and saw an old man wearing a black Navy captain's uniform and a white Navy hat standing on a Pokemon. The old man's Navy coat was open, swaying in the sea breeze, looking quite chic. But the most eye-catching thing was the Pokemon under his feet, an elite-level Salamence. This dress and the Pokemon under his feet also revealed the identity of the old man, Hoenn Elite 4-Dragon Elite Drake. Seeing Drake's figure, Jack's face showed an extremely terrified expression. He could only instinctively urge Fiero to run fast, and the sound seemed particularly ridiculous in the silent night sky. Originally, I was planning to capture a live person, but seeing that you were planning to attack the sailors on the ship before, I don't need to hold back. Go to hell and repent. Salamence, destroy the death ray. Salamence under Drake's feet roared, as if he sensed the rage in Trainer's heart, and spewed out a destroying death ray from his mouth, directly blasting towards Jack. Jack looked at the attacking destruction death ray and could only instinctively wail for mercy, but he couldn't stop the attack of the destruction death ray. Maen on the deck only saw a giant laser passing through the night sky, briefly illuminating the night sky, and then the figures of Jack and Fiyero fell from soaring in the sky and hit the deck directly. Jack on the deck had turned into a human-shaped charcoal, and the other Fiyero was also breathing out but not in. Maen looked at the miserable state of Red Hand Jack and could only sigh that if a person is unlucky, even drinking cold water will make his teeth ache. If other elites came, they might be able to save their lives because Jack has been on the sea for nearly 10 years. It is absolutely impossible to say that Jack has not hidden any property, so with this, he might be able to save his life. But unfortunately, it was Drake Elite who came. Drake's dress explained some problems because Drake was a captain when he was young, and he naturally had a good impression of these sailors on the sea and regarded these sailors as his juniors. So Jack's behavior of ordering Feraligat to attack the sailors was completely challenging the bottom line of Drake Elite, and naturally he would not hold back. This situation directly frightened the remaining pirates who resisted. One of the pirates directly took back the Pokemon and threw away his weapon, kneeling on the ground and shouting that he surrendered. With the first one, there was a second one, and finally the remaining pirates all knelt on the ground and gave up resistance. As Drake landed on the deck riding Salamence, the whole battle was completely declared over. Drake looked at Maen after landing. After all, Maen in normal clothes stood out among a group of sailors. Seeing Drake coming towards them, Maen and Jengar, who were taking the spoils from Hunter K, stopped in a hurry and stood up quickly. Zweilous beside, Maen looked straight at Salamence beside Drake. The instinct from a dragon Pokemon made it want to challenge Salamence, but Zweilous also knew that the gap was too big now, so he just looked at Salamence without saying a word. "You're Maen, right? Does Drake Elite know me?" "Ha ha, your grandma Agatha and I are old friends. She mentioned you to me a lot before. Although Agatha has been trying to hide it, I, an old friend, can hear the proud tone in her voice clearly. And this time I came here because Agatha told me that there are pirates here to rob." Drake was talking to Maen, and he couldn't help laughing when he thought of Agatha's appearance before. After all, he had known Agatha for decades, and only when Maen was mentioned would Agatha's facial expression change. Maen heard what Drake said, thought of the message he left for Grandma Agatha before, and understood the reason for Drake's arrival. He also had a general understanding of the relationship between Grandma Agatha and Drake Elite. Agatha and Drake are definitely old friends. Otherwise, it would be impossible for them to come here directly because of a piece of information. Chapter 51 read Jack's treasure. Drake Elite saw the Zweilous next to Maen and showed a surprised look in his eyes. Then he couldn't help but said to Maen, "Maen, your Zweilous is well-bred. It can be seen that you usually work very hard. Both the size and fur color are much better than the Zweilous I met." As a Dragon-type Elite, Drake naturally knows a lot about Dragon-type Pokemon, so he also cares about Dragon-type Pokemon. Seeing that Zweilous was bred so well by Maen, the expression on his face was also very happy. "Thank you, Drake Elite. It's all the little guy's hard work." Maen touched the two heads of the Zweilous next to him, causing the two heads of the two-headed evil dragon to show a comfortable expression. Drake Elite saw the interaction between Maen and Zweilous and knew that Maen and Pokemon also had a very good relationship. He was more optimistic about this young man. After all, he had devoted his whole life to Salamence, who saved him. So he felt happy to see that Maen had such a deep bond with Pokemon. "Drake Elite, I wonder if I can take these trophies of Hunter K. And this guy should have a bounty in the Alliance, right?" Maen suddenly thought of Hunter K, who was captured alive by him. Criminals like this must have a record in the Alliance. It's no wonder that Maen is greedy. He has almost consumed the resources that Zapdos exchanged before. For example, the 3 Dusk Stones before have been divided into one Pokemon by Jengar and Dano, and Maen has completely mastered the formula of the Energy Cube. Although Maen can buy the raw materials of the Energy Cube at cost price, his own Jengar and Zweilous are big eaters and consume a lot of resources every day. Marn has already used up 1/3 of the money he got from selling gold from Steven and the money he got from the Alliance Aptos. Although there is still a lot left, Marn must prepare the capital in advance. He has a feeling that the 3rd battle Pokemon in his lineup is not far away. So he will not hesitate to use Hunter K, a Pokemon hunter, to exchange for bounties. Maen is also ready to sell Beedrill and Ariados in Hunter K's hands to the black market. Drake was stunned for a moment when he heard what Maen said. Then he laughed and said, "So that's all. You defeated Hunter K. So his ownership naturally belongs to you, and the bounty and Pokemon of the pirate just now are also given to you. After all, if you didn't take action this time, everyone on the ship would be in danger." "Really? Drake Elite, the pirate should be considered your spoils. I don't need it, and you scared the pirate away. A good man of the sea will not do such an ungrateful thing. I will check the bounty of Hunter K and the pirate later, and I will let Alliance transfer the bounty to your account. Thank you, Drake Elite. By the way, can I borrow the first mate of the pirate group?" "Huh, lend him." "Oh, so you want to, but I don't think you need to have too much hope." Drake knew what Maen was thinking as soon as he heard it, but he didn't say much. Instead, he looked at Maen with a weirder look. He didn't expect that Maen was young, but he still had a lot of thoughts. On the other side, Maen looked at the first mate of the pirate group brought by the sailors, and then asked Jengar to go up and entertain him well. With Jengar's enthusiastic help, the first mate quickly recalled the treasure hiding place of his Captain Jack. As a pirate captain, Red Hand Jack naturally understood the principle of cunning rabbits having 3 burrows, so most of his assets were hidden in a secret place, and this place should have been unknown to no one except Jack himself. But pirates are pirates, and the first mate had other thoughts long ago. He has been with Jack for almost 10 years, and he knows Jack's character very well. At the same time, he has secretly watched Jack and figured out Jack's treasure hiding place. When he saw Jack being killed by Drake Elite Salamence, he was excited in his heart, because if Jack died, he would be the only one who knew the treasure hiding place. This time, the first mate was not in a hurry when he was caught by the Alliance, because he understood the legislative strength of the Alliance. Even if he robbed the San Aninu, he would not be sentenced to death. At most, he would be imprisoned for more than 10 years. If he performed well, he could be released early. The first mate planned to go to prison with the news of the treasure. When he came out, he would be in his 50s. When he dug Jack's treasure, he would have something to look forward to in the rest of his life. But the first mate had never expected to meet Maen, a swindler. He directly treated him with Jengar and told him the location of the treasure under hypnosis. Looking at the first mate who was taken away in a daze, Drake Elite's forehead also shed a little cold sweat. Looking at Maen, he could only sigh that Maen was really lucky to have the news of the treasure. "Drake Elite, do you need to inform Alliance about the news of the treasure?" "If you do, I want to share," Maen said sadly to Drake Elite next to him. After all, the stolen money robbed by Red Hand Jack should be returned to the Alliance. If Maen found out privately, he could not report it, but Drake Elite was from the Alliance, so Maen could only bring it up first, which was also considered to leave a good impression. When he thought about sharing the money with the Alliance, Maen felt a little distressed. The thief leader Jack is dead, so there is no news about his inheritance. And Maen, didn't you just inquire about the property of the first mate? So there is no need to report it to the Alliance. Drake Elite smiled at Maen, and then began to lie for Maen without changing his expression. Drake Elite never intended to ask Maen to report to the Alliance. After all, the Alliance is the Alliance, and he is him. For Maen, the grandson of his friend and the younger generation he is optimistic about, the treasure might as well be left to Maen, and he can become friends with Agatha Elite. He and Agatha have the same attitude of looking down on some useless senior executives of the Alliance. If it weren't for helping the people, he would still be his own captain. Maen smiled at each other after hearing what Drake Elite said, and the old and the young understood the meaning of each other's eyes. Chapter 52. Possible future of Zweilous Hoenn region. Moss Deep City is an island city in the east of Hoenn region. Every year, many tourists come here to travel because there's a famous landscape here, which is to see Whalemere. At this time, Maen was in the Pokemon Center of Moss Deep City, handing Dano and Jengar's Pokeball to Nurse Joy, while Maen was waiting in the lobby. After the pirate robbery, SS, and arrived safely in Hoenn region under the escort of Drake Elite, and the first stop was Moss Deep City, which was also Maen's final destination, because this island city was the closest city to the ancient ruins that Maen was going to. While on the ship, Maen also talked a lot with Drake Elite. Drake also told Maen some Dragon Pokemon training techniques, which benefited Maen a lot. Maen, your Pokemon has recovered. Thank you, Nurse Joy. Maen brought his Pokeball to a villa in Moss Deep City, which was also the place where Maen rested in Moss Deep City. But don't get me wrong, Maen doesn't have that much money to buy a villa. The owner of this villa is Steven. Steven made a special call to greet Maen after knowing that Maen came to Hoenn region. After knowing that Maen was in Moss Deep City, Steven specially lent the empty villa in Moss Deep City to Maen to live in. Maen did not refuse. After all, Steven's villa was not only luxurious and comfortable, but also had complete training facilities, which Maen just needed. Zweilous, come out. Maen threw out the Pokeball. He called out his Zweilous. After Dano evolved, Maen had no time to communicate with it properly because there was one biggest difference between Zweilous and Dano. That is, both heads of Zweilous are conscious, and they often fight for food in order to gain more dominance. This situation leads to Zweilous often being bruised before fighting and quarreling over directions when walking or eating too much because of grabbing food. In short, Zweilous is more difficult to take care of than Dano, so Maen needs to prepare in advance to take better care of Zweilous. Although his Dano is very smart, Maen is not sure whether the personality and other aspects of Pokemon will change greatly after evolution. However, after Maen asked Zweilous if there was any problem, he showed a surprised expression on his face, because Maen found that the two heads of his Zweilous did not quarrel at all, but instead showed a plain nice performance. After being surprised, Maen carefully asked Zweilous about some things, and finally he roughly guessed some of them. Maen guessed that his Dano's original rationality and wisdom were far higher than those of normal Dano. After the evolution of normal Dano, the personality and wisdom would not change, but the consciousness will be separated into two parts. When two violent idiots get together, they would naturally quarrel. But Maen was a special case. Even if the consciousness was separated, the two heads could roughly understand their own situation. So not only did they not quarrel, but they played nice with each other in order to make their bodies healthier. Maen told Professor Oak about Zweilous' situation and his guess, which made Professor Oak excited and put his face on the screen of Pokédex. If Maen hadn't mentioned that he was going to take Zweilous to the ancient ruins, Professor Oak would probably have asked Maen to teleport Zweilous for a detailed examination. After all, if he could really understand Zweilous' situation, there would be a new breakthrough in the investigation of this kind of Pokemon. What a pity. I really want to examine Zweilous myself. Professor Oak said something that would make Pokemon feel like they had encountered a pervert. After Maen hung up the phone call with Professor Oak, a special idea suddenly came to his mind. That is, can his Zweilous release different skills with two heads at the same time? As soon as this idea came out, Maen felt that he could not suppress his excitement and hurriedly pulled Zweilous to try it. On the other side, Zweilous heard Maen's idea, and the two heads looked at each other, but did not refuse. After all, Zweilous would not refuse anyway to become stronger. Zweilous used Dragon Breath and Bite at the same time. Zweilous heard Maen's words and gathered energy in both heads at the same time, one gathering dragon energy in its mouth, and the other gathering evil energy. But the gathering speed was obviously a bit slow. Under normal circumstances, the skills should have been released at this time. Maen stood aside and silently wrote down these changes with a notebook. After gathering energy, the dragon energy was launched, but the evil energy gathered in the mouth of Bite on the other side dissipated after the dragon energy was released, and Bite failed to release successfully. Although he failed, Maen was not discouraged because from the situation of Zweilous, it is not impossible to release different skills at the same time. As long as you understand the principle of Zweilous energy operation and then train it, you can definitely release different skills at the same time. Maen suddenly thought that if his special Zweilous evolved into Hydreigon, would there be another transformation? Although Hydreigon has 3 heads, only one of them is conscious. But Maen thinks that it is not impossible for his Hydreigon to release 3 skills at the same time. Even if the power is weakened, both the attack range and the suppression will be greatly improved. However, Maen thought about these things a little far. Now Maen's goal is to explore the ancient ruins as soon as possible after repairing. and then study the future direction of Zweilous after exploring the ancient ruins. Maen took out 2 maps from his backpack, one of which was the ancient ruins before. Maen had roughly understood the location on it, which was on an uninhabited island, not too far from Moss Deep City. The other one was the location of Red Jack's hidden property obtained from the first mate. To Maen's surprise, the location of this treasure was not far from the ancient ruins, so it was just right to catch all of them. Chapter 53, Ancient Text Behind the Treasure Map, Hoenn Region C. Maen sat on Lapras's back, enjoying the sea breeze, holding a map in his hand and heading to Captain Jack's treasure. Lapras sang a happy song while swimming, causing other water Pokémon in the sea to surround Lapras and swim together with the beautiful song. Compared with Sharpedo's high speed of 120 kilometers per hour, Lapra's speed is not fast, but not slow either. But the biggest advantage of Pokémon like Lapras is its strong endurance. Not only does it like to sail with people, but it also does not get tired after sailing for more than 10 hours at sea. Maen sailed on Lapras for a while and saw a small island, which was exactly the treasure of Red Hand Jack. This Red Hand Jack is indeed worthy of being a great pirate who has been in business for 10 years. He has saved so much property. Maen stood in front of Jack's treasure house, looking at the scattered gold coins and jewelry with a satisfied look on his face, and was very satisfied with his harvest this time. Jack's treasure house is naturally guarded by mechanisms, but this is not a problem for Maen, who is Jengar. With the help of Jengar, Maen easily resisted the treasure house all the way. Red-Handed Jack actually planned to retire after completing this job on SSN. He had already robbed enough property over the years, and he could actually retire, but Red-Handed Jack wanted more fame, and he planned to leave a title like Pirate King before retiring. Facts have proved that it is not so easy to be the Pirate King. After all, this is the world of Pokémon, not the world of One Piece. Red-Handed Jack did not wear a straw hat, and he did not know how to do sit-ups. If he could stand up after being hit by a destructive death ray, Maen would be willing to call Jack the Pirate King. Maen looked at the treasure immediately. He definitely could not carry so many things, so he cast his eyes on Jengar on the other side. Jengar saw Maen's gaze, and his face changed. He hurriedly shook his head to indicate that he could not save anymore. His stomach could not hold so many things. Maen looked at Jengar's expression and could only sigh helplessly. Since he couldn't save it, he could only leave it here for now. At worst, he could ask Steven to deal with it later. After all, Steven's family had connections and could easily get a ship to take it away, and they were generous. After leaving the island, Maen's goal turned to the destination, the uninhabited island of Ancient Ruins. The island of Ancient Ruins was not far from Jack's treasure hiding place. Maen, riding Lapras, arrived at the destination in half an hour. The area of this island is much larger, but it is more remote in the ocean, so basically no one has come here. And Maen guessed that the ancient ruins have not been exposed for so many years, probably because there are few people and the ancient ruins themselves are hidden. So even if someone landed on the island, there would be no discovery. Maen actually asked Sabrina's father how he got the treasure map, and the final answer was that Sabrina's father encountered a blind tomb robber in the wild when he was traveling in his early years and provoked him, and ended up looting it from the tomb robber. Originally, it was just a treasure map, which would not have made Sabrina's father particularly concerned. What made Sabrina's father concerned was the words written on the back of the treasure map. 2 forces that destroy the world, Black's darkness, blackened soaring in the sky, and golden eyes, disturb the air, splitting the world into 2 disputes. People were helpless. The gate to the other world opened in soaring in the sky. At this time, the power to calm everything appeared and turned into a sphere and returned below the horizon. The evil of man, dragon rage, the end of everything under the ground. The new moon is in the sky, the beginning of darkness, the source of destruction. When everything is asleep, nightmares follow, and the starting point of everything converges here. The back of the treasure map recorded a prophecy in ancient text. The message on it was also told to Maen by Sabrina's father. However, after translating this text, Sabrina's father met the person he loved most, and then got married and gave birth to Sabrina. He never had time to explore this treasure map, But because of the prophecy on it, Sabrina's father instinctively felt that it was not simple, so he kept it until he gave it to Maen. I have to say that Sabrina's father's guess was not wrong, because Maen remembered the first half of this prophecy. In the original book, this ancient text actually represents the ancient giant Pakmon. In the animation, the giant Jengar and Alakazam represent the darkness of black and golden eyes in the prophecy, as well as the giant Jigglypuff later. What surprised Maen was why the giant Jengar appeared in the Kanto region in the original plot, but the address of this ancient ruins was on the island between Hoenn and Johto region. What surprised Maen the most was the ancient text in the latter part. In the original plot, Maen had never seen this. Although this text was simple, it vaguely mentioned the source of the ancient giant Pakmon. You should know that Kabutops and Aerodactyl are all ancient Pakmon, and even the ancient Pakmon of the Shitsue region is known to Maen. But none of these Pakmon have this kind of gigantic state, and as far as Maen knows, gigantic is exclusive to the Galar region. However, the Dynamax in the Galar region will not be permanent, and there will be no strange black stripes on the body, so the appearance of giant ancient Pakmon should be a special case. In the animation, there are several giant ancient Pakmon. In addition to the three mentioned above, there is also the giant Dragonite at the lighthouse and the giant Tentacruel that appears on the seashore. The giant Tentacruel has no black stripes on its body, so it should be an accidental product created by the living environment, and the ancient Dragonite is in the thick fog, and it is not known whether it has black stripes on its body in the animation. However, Maen speculates that the giant Dragonite should also appear with the giant Jengar, because the second half of the ancient text says the evil of man, dragon rage, the end of all things. The dragon here is probably the giant Dragonite. But these are just Maen's guesses after all. The specific truth requires Maen to go to the island and explore it personally. Chapter 54, Exploring Ancient Ruins and Uninhabited Island in the Sea of Hoenn region. Maen took Jengar to explore the island roughly. Now the island has formed its own ecological chain, and many Pakmon live there, but none of them are too rare and powerful. After the exploration, Maen did not find any traces of ancient ruins. In the end, Maen guessed that the ancient ruins should exist underground as recorded in the text. If the ancient ruins are underground, there should be a special entrance, and the entrance to such ruins is normally hidden in the mountains. Thinking of this, Maen cast his eyes on the largest mountain on the island, and then rushed over with Jengar. With the help of Jengar, Maen really found a cave hidden under the vines, and then turned on the flashlight and went in. Maen walked in the cave, and only the sound of Maen's footsteps echoed around him. Koye! Jengar got out of the wall next to him, and then took out a few stones from his mouth and handed them to Maen. Maen took these stones, and found that these things were actually Pakmon fossils, which were also found by Jengar in several cracks in the rocks. The appearance of so many fossils means that there must have been a large number of Pakmon living here in ancient times, which proves that Maen's guess is correct, and the entrance to the ruins should be hidden in this mountain. Thinking of this, Maen quickened his pace and continued to walk quickly in the cave. However, to Maen's surprise, there was a stone wall at the end of the cave corridor, and there was no passage to go forward at all. It seems that there should be a mechanism here. Jengar, please. Jengar heard Maen's words, grinned and saluted, and then drilled into the wall. After a while, Jengar drilled out again, and then came to a stone wall and pressed the bulge on it. The sound of boom sounded in the cave. Dust and gravel fell on Maen's head from time to time, but Maen didn't care, because the place blocked by the stone wall in front of him suddenly slowly opened an entrance. The entrance to the ancient ruins appeared. Maen swallowed his saliva, then walked in through the entrance with determination. Behind the entrance was a spiral staircase leading directly to the underground. Maen moved down the stairs little by little and finally came to the underground. After Maen came to the underground, he found a gate in front of him. The gate had no mechanism. Maen just pushed it hard and successfully pushed it open, then walked in. Then Maen saw the true appearance of the ancient ruins. A huge ancient city. Under the light of the flashlight, Maen could see the general outline of the city in front of him. The architectural style above was obviously ancient, but now it has turned into a piece of broken walls. Maen judged at a glance that these destroyed buildings were not naturally damaged, but were damaged by a powerful attack before. Maen observed the surrounding environment all the way and finally came to the center of the city. This is it. Maen looked at the huge building in front of him, and his surprise was undisguised, because the building in front of him was an ancient palace, and the fact that it had a palace meant that the city was the capital city where the king lived. Although most of the palace was destroyed, it still had a small part intact compared to the buildings next to it. Maen walked into the intact part of the palace, where there were still some traces of ancient people's lives, such as some broken vases and furniture. Maen even saw some ancient books on the table, but because of their age, the books had become very fragile and covered with dust, and there was no way to see the words on them clearly. Maen explored the palace one by one, but he didn't find anything useful, until Maen saw a stone chamber, the area of which was not small in the palace. But this stone chamber was the best preserved in the entire palace, as if it had not received any damage. This appearance that was out of tune with the surroundings immediately attracted Maen's attention. Maen guessed that the secret of this ancient city might be hidden behind the stone chamber. The door of the stone chamber was slowly pushed by Maen. The harsh friction sound indicated that it had not been opened for a long time, and there was a lot of dust when it was pushed. After pushing the door open, the scene inside came into view. There were a lot of murals carved on the walls around, and several desks were placed on the ground, on which were placed some damaged books and some things that looked like experimental tools, and there was also a big box in the corner. Maen first looked at the murals around him, because this space felt like the archives or laboratory of the palace. And these murals probably recorded some things that happened at that time. Although Maen did not know ancient characters, he could roughly see what the murals above meant. The ancient Pokemon were not as gentle as they are now. At that time, Pokemon were called Warcraft. Although there was also the profession of Warcraft, the ancient people were generally suppressed by Pokemon. A little man trembled on the mural, and the pattern of Pokemon laughing wildly next to him made Maen fully understand the situation at that time. Then a little man holding a sword defeated the laughing Pokemon. The little man holding the sword conquered everywhere and defeated people from other regions. Then at the end of the mural, a little man wearing a crown sat on a chair, and below him were people kneeling. The sky of the crowd was depicted with patterns of Jengar and Alakazam. Looking at these, Maen guessed that the king of this ancient kingdom got the huge Jengar and Alakazam for some reason, and then defeated the surrounding Pokemon and countries and unified the nearby land. However, Maen felt that things were not so simple, because there was no source of Jengar and Alakazam engraved on the mural at all, as if normal appeared out of thin air, and this situation might be intentional by the person who engraved the mural. After all, the craftsmen working for the king only needed to engrave the heroic side of the king, and as for other things, they were not allowed to know. Chapter 55 Darkrai. After Maen took a photo of the mural, he took back the Pokédex and looked at the only big box on the ground. The books on the other tables had weathered and decayed, and it was impossible to read them. The only things that could be preserved in this room were the things in the box. Maen opened the sealed box and instructed Jengar to blow away the dust. To Maen's surprise, there was not much in a big box, but a notebook-like thing and a key. Taking out the notes, Maen slowly flipped through them. Although the text on them was ancient, these notes were not only ancient, but also had annotations of pictures next to them, which Maen could roughly understand. The more Maen read the content on the above, the more solemn his expression became, because the content on the notes was really shocking. It recorded some pictures of Pokemon, but what shocked Maen was that the pictures recorded Pokemon in too much detail, not only the size and weight, but also the bones and muscles and anatomical diagrams. Maen felt a little uncomfortable. The detailed pictures on it proved that the ancient people here probably captured and killed Pokemon a lot in order to study Pokemon, and used Pokemon as guinea pigs for experiments. As Maen turned the pages little by little, his eyes also stopped on one of the pages, because the pictures on this page were Jengar, Alakazam, and Jigglypuff. These three Pokemon were specially marked and circled. Although Maen couldn't understand the words on it, He could guess that these 3 Pokemon might be the materials that met the experiment. After turning this page, Maen came to the last page of the notebook. The picture on it was a Dragonite, but there was a big question mark next to the Dragonite. Seeing this, Maen vaguely guessed some traces in his heart. But Maen knew that all the answers should be revealed on that key. And Maen also found the corresponding lock for that key. At the end of this stone room, a stone door. Maen slowly walked to the stone door, then gently inserted the key into the lock and turned it. With a click, the stone door opened. Maen slowly pushed the stone door open and walked in. As soon as he entered the stone door, Maen's expression became very ugly when he saw the scene inside, and he immediately locked Lapras's Pokeball on to prevent Lapras from seeing the outside from the facade. Behind the stone door is a spacious corridor, but on both sides of the corridor are built rooms like prisons normal. There are iron chains on the facade of the room, and in addition to the iron chains, there are countless bones. These bones are the bones of Pokemon. Obviously, these prisons and chains are used to imprison the Pokemon here, and the fate of these Pokemon is also very obvious. That is, the materials for the experiments in the previous notes. Maen was silent and said nothing, and the haze on his body began to surge. Even Jengar next to him saw this scene, and the smile on his face disappeared, and a rage expression appeared on his face. Fortunately, it didn't take long for Maen to keep his emotions, and the haze on his body slowly retracted. Maen knew that this was not the end, because there was a stone door at the end of the corridor, which was probably the end of the laboratory and the secret of the appearance of the huge ancient Pokemon. Maen walked to the stone door with a heavy heart and slowly pushed it open. After that, the expression on Maen's face turned into shock. Maen had seen the madness of the ancients before, but he could still maintain his sanity when he saw the previous scene. But when he saw the scene of the laboratory behind the stone door, Maen was really shocked. The stone room was indeed a laboratory, with various research items placed in it. In the center of the laboratory was a completely closed and transparent cage, on which various strange patterns were clearly engraved. There were also several pipes connected around the cage, which led to several other cages. But what shocked Maen was not the layout here, but the Pokemon in the cage in the center. The Pokemon inside is like the shadow of black normal, with a head of rolling white hair covering most of its face, revealing only a pair of eyes. Its neck is surrounded by a red, jagged object like a collar normal. A long black rag hangs on each of its shoulders. The Pokemon inside is the phantom Pokemon, Darkrai, the god of nightmares. Maen thought of the ancient text behind the treasure map before, which mentioned that when everything is asleep, nightmares follow. At that time, Maen didn't understand what it meant. Now, after seeing Darkrai, Maen understood. Maen never dreamed that those ancient people were so crazy that they actually imprisoned Darkrai, and they actually succeeded. As for how to imprison Darkrai, Maen guessed that it might be related to the ancient imprisonment technology. For example, the ancient Jengar and the ancient Alakazam did not appear from the Pokeball, but were crystallized things like black crystal stones and spoons. Obviously, these Pokemon are controlled by an unknown imprison method, and Darkrai is obviously trapped here because of this. And the patterns carved on the cage may be the reason why Darkrai is imprisoned here. At this time, a Darkrai with his eyes closed in the cage suddenly opened his eyes. Maen didn't know how to describe the emotions contained in Darkrai's blue eyes. Without the spirituality of Pokemon, it seemed numb, full of sad emotions and a feeling of covet's liberation. Maen looked at Darkrai's eyes and slowly walked to the cage and put his hand on the transparent cage. And Darkrai on the facade slowly raised his hand tied by the chain and put it together with Maen's hand through the cage. At this time, Maen suddenly felt a strange memory rushing into his mind crazily. But Maen did not resist because he knew that this was the memory transmitted to him by Darkrai. This memory is also the truth about the destruction of this ancient city and the appearance of a huge Pokemon. Chapter 56. The Secret of the Giant Ancient Pokemon. After accepting this memory of Darkrai, Maen rubbed his aching head. After all, so many memories were poured in at once. Even with Maen's strong mental strength, it was a bit uncomfortable. However, After Maen read these memories, his eyes looked at Darkrai more complicated. This was indeed an ancient city, and the predecessor of this city was just an ordinary small village. When it was still a small village, it was often attacked by Pokemon, and people lived in misery. In the mural, the king led Gengar and Alakazam to defeat the surrounding Pokemon and save the village. But in fact, it was Darkrai in front of Maen who saved the village. Although Darkrai looks like a terrible Pokemon, Darkrai's nature has never been bad. For example, the Darkrai in Sinnoh Poplar Town even dared to fight Dialga and Palkia to save Poplar Town. The same is true for Darkrai in front of Maen. When he saw the villagers being attacked, Darkrai took action. It used the power of nightmares to put all the attacking Pokemon to sleep and save the people in the village. Originally, Darkrai was going to leave after saving the village because he knew how powerful it was. If he stayed in the village for too long, he was worried that it would hurt the people, so he didn't plan to stay here at the beginning. But the turning point of things appeared. The young king noticed Darkrai's concerns, and the young king, who inherited the imprisoned technology at home, had evil thoughts in his mind. He planned to control Darkrai to work for him. But the king also knew that his strength was not enough to subdue Darkrai, even if he attacked imprisoned by surprise. So the king took advantage of Darkrai's sympathy. He mobilized the masses to ask Darkrai to stay, and then deceived Darkrai that he was willing to help Darkrai find a way to control the nightmare power. Darkrai hesitated and finally agreed to the king's request. But Darkrai was also deceived. The king deceived Darkrai into falling into a trap and captured Darkrai with the power of imprison. But Darkrai is a phantom Pokemon after all. Even imprison can only control him. It is impossible for the king to completely recover him. Finally, the king thought of a way. That is to directly extract the power of the Nightmare God and transfer it to other Pokemon. With this idea, the king began an inhumane experiment and finally successfully extracted part of the power of the Nightmare God and injected it into a Gengar. Under the power of the Nightmare God, black lines appeared all over Gengar's body, and his size and strength also became stronger. The king took this opportunity to recover Gengar with imprisoned's props. Later, in order to continue to strengthen his strength, the king created a giant Alakazam. With the help of the two Pokemon, the king was unstoppable in this land and eventually developed the village into a city. But the king was getting older and older, and he was addicted to alcohol and SX, so he was no longer willing to go to the battlefield. He handed the giant Gengar and Alakazam to his young generals. And in order to prevent the generals from using giant Pokemon to usurp the throne, he specially made a giant Jigglypuff that restrained the two giant Pokemon. Such days lasted for decades, until the king was old and thought of passing the throne to his son. But he was afraid of the power and prestige that the general had built over the years. The king did not care about the giant Gengar and Alakazam under the general, because he had a way to restrain them. But the trouble was that the general had another Pokemon under his command, Dragonite, a dragon-type quasi-god. The old king thought of a way, that is, to inject Dragonite as an experimental subject with the power of Darkrai, and then imprison himself recovered it and handed it over to his descendants, so that the empire would be worry-free. The general, who was devoted to the country, did not see the king's intention. After a dinner, Dragonite was captured and the general was killed by the king. The captured Dragonite became the material for the experiment and was eventually injected with Darkrai's power. But the body of the quasi-god is much stronger than that of an ordinary Pokemon. After Darkrai injected a large amount of energy, Dragonite successfully became huge, but also lost his mind. The insane Dragonite finally calmed down his anger. The other three giant Pokemon could not compare to Dragonite in terms of size or strength. In the end, the city was completely destroyed, and the king and his descendants died in the city together. In order to prevent Darkrai from escaping, Darkrai's laboratory used special materials, and a location was hidden, so it was completely preserved. The insane Dragonite finally left, and only the scene of the first meeting with the general was retained in its mind, which was next to a lighthouse on the coast. So the giant Dragonite in the animation often wanders around the Bill Lighthouse and keeps shouting, I want to see you. The person the giant Dragonite wants to see is his trainer, the general. And with the destruction of the ancient city, Darkrai was also imprisoned here. But the location here is generally close to the Hoenn region, and the Hoenn region has to mention the two great beasts of Hoenn, Kyogre and Groudon. The fight between the two spread here, and the entire land was directly shattered into a small island, and then floated on the sea forever. Darkrai was imprisoned here for hundreds of years for this reason, until Kristoff came here today. Maen looked at the iron cage engraved with the imprisoned pattern in front of him and ordered Gengar to smash it directly. The strength of this imprison lies in the internal imprison, which is why Darkrai has not been able to get rid of it until now. Darkrai's iron cage not only has the function of imprison, but also the surrounding pipes are constantly extracting Darkrai's power in order to suppress Darkrai and prevent it from escaping. An imprison is not so strong against external attacks. Under Gengar's attack, the iron cage broke. Darkrai sees the light of day again. The cage broke, and Darkrai's body collapsed to the ground. Maen quickly helped Darkrai break the chains, freeing Darkrai from his restraints. Chapter 57, Recovering Darkrai. Thank you, human. A hoarse voice suddenly appeared in Maen's mind. He knew that it was Darkrai in front of him, thanking him. The Phantom Pokémon not only brings the unique species strength advantage, but also has powerful abilities. For a Pokémon like Darkrai, who has lived for hundreds of years, telepathy is not a problem at all. Maen just nodded slightly to thank Darkrai, and then stretched out his hand and put it on Darkrai. The moment Maen's hand touched Darkrai, he could clearly feel Darkrai's body trembling, obviously recalling the previous imprisonment by humans. Maen didn't say much, and used the dark power in his body to transfer it to Darkrai's body. As the dark power like mist was transferred to Darkrai's body, Darkrai's face showed a relaxed expression for the first time. The transmission of dark power did not stop until Maen felt tired. Darkrai's celestic strength was restored, but the dark injuries in his body were only repaired a little bit. After all, hundreds of years and the creation of huge ancient Pokémon not only drained Darkrai's power, but also caused Darkrai to be covered with hidden injuries. Maen, who had consumed too much dark power, sat cross-legged on the ground, panting, and slowly said to Darkrai, "Darkrai, what are your plans for the future?" Darkrai heard Maen's words, and his eyes showed confusion. He had been locked in a cage for hundreds of years. His revenge had been avenged, and he knew nothing about the outside world. He didn't know what he should do next. Seeing Darkrai's confused eyes, Maen also guessed Darkrai's current confusion, and then continued, "Darkrai, why don't you just follow me?" Darkrai was shocked when he heard Maen's words, and then recalled that he had been deceived by the king before and instinctively planned to refuse Maen. But Maen did not give Darkrai a chance to refuse, but continued, "Darkrai, you should understand how attractive your phantom Pokémon is to humans. If you leave here and go outside, after someone finds your trace, there will still be countless people who want to capture you, and the methods used by people nowadays are more advanced, and there's no need to deceive you with lies." Hearing Maen's words, Darkrai was speechless because he knew that Maen was right. After experiencing the incident with the king, he knew that Maen was right, so he looked at Maen seriously with his blue eyes. Maen saw Darkrai's eyes and did not flinch, but looked at him with the same determination. "Darkrai, I hope to regain you. I admit that I value your strength, but I don't want you to continue to live in pursuit in the future. After all, your current strength has declined too seriously. There are many humans who can deal with you now. You have also felt my previous strength. This is my natural ability. It can not only help you make up for your hidden injuries, but also help you recover your strength as soon as possible." Maen did not hide his intention to regain Darkrai. After all, after regaining, the rest of the life of the person and the Pokémon will be bound together, and lies can't maintain this relationship at all. It's better to tell Darkrai directly. Darkrai heard Maen's words, looked at Maen's firm eyes, and thought of Maen's previous life-saving grace to it, and the dark power that Maen gave it just now. It can feel the help from that power. Most importantly, Darkrai did not sense any deception from Maen. Darkrai nodded slightly. Maen saw Darkrai's actions, and the expression on his face was also very happy. Gengar next to him also took out a small trumpet from his mouth and played it happily. This is a small toy that Gengar stored for himself, so that as the big brother of the team, he can welcome the Pokemon that may join in the future. Well, although Darkrai is older than at this time, he is still the big brother of the team according to the relationship of seniority. After successfully recovering Darkrai, Maen took Gengar and Darkrai to leave the prison together. Before leaving the prison, Maen took Gengar to collect all the bones of Pokemon that he had seen before and then buried them together. This is the only thing Maen can do to help these Pokemon who died tragically. At the same time, Maen commanded Gengar to completely destroy the laboratory, making this laboratory and this ruins normal completely become a dust in history. When they came to the beach of the uninhabited island, Maen also called out Zweilous and Lapras and introduced Darkrai to them. Hearing that there were new companions joining, Zweilous and Lapras warmly welcomed them, and Lapras also sang a cheerful song. Although Lapras didn't know why Maen locked his Pokeball, the young Lapras didn't care. After all, what the trainer does is always right. Darkrai's eyes softened when he heard Lapras' cheerful singing. Seeing the cordial interaction between Maen and the Pokemon and the joy that Lapras couldn't hide in his singing, Darkrai could guess what Maen's personality was like, and he was more convinced that his decision was right. Maen rode on Lapras' back and talked to Professor Oak in the Pokédex. He told Professor Oak about the gains from the ruins and also told Professor about Darkrai. Although Darkrai escaped successfully, he still had a lot of hidden injuries on his body, so Maen also needed Professor Oak to help him do a detailed examination. But Maen was worried that if Darkrai's Pokeball was directly transmitted, the various instruments in Professor Oak's laboratory would cause Darkrai's psychological shadow, and it would not be a good thing if he couldn't control his emotions at that time. So Maen hoped that Professor Oak could recommend a professional in the Hoenn region to him. Professor Oak heard about Maen's experience and congratulated him on his ability to recover Darkrai. But after hearing the story, his expression became a little sad. After all, for someone like Professor Oak, who is committed to the harmonious coexistence of people and Pokemon, this kind of thing is too heavy. Fortunately, Professor Oak has seen everything over the years, and he quickly sorted out his emotions and recommended Professor Birch, a professional in the Hoenn region, to Maen. Chapter 58 Professor Birch Maen is not unfamiliar with the name Professor Birch. After all, the appearance of this professor is so classic. Whether in the game or in the animation, he was chased by Poochyena and hid in a tree. Although Odaki's behavior seems a bit funny, Professor Birch's love for Pokemon is indeed sincere. Under normal circumstances, it is impossible for a Pokeball carrying the 3 starter Pokemon to fail to deal with Poochyena. In the animation, May released Marshtomp and could not command it all. In the end, it was Odaki who commanded Marshtomp to drive away Poochyena. From this point, it can be seen that Odaki has a certain command ability. He is afraid of Poochyena and may just not want to hurt them. In the end, he had no choice but to command Pokemon to attack Poochyena, and he only drove them away. Maen did not refuse Professor Oak's recommendation. In addition, Professor Birch's ability as a professor must be good and his character is guaranteed. So Maen also plans to go to Little Root Town. Little Root Town is in the southwest of Hoenn region, so Maen can only fly there quickly by plane. Little Root Town is known as a town that is not colored by any color. The reason why Little Root Town became famous as a small town is the same as Pallet Town, because Professor Birch lives here. Maen easily found Professor Birch's laboratory and pressed the doorbell. What was not unexpected by Maen was that although the doorbell rang, the person who answered was not Professor Birch, but his assistant. Monsieur, Maen, are you here to find Professor Birch? He told me before that you would come to visit him, but he is not in the laboratory now. I heard that a friend's child is coming, so Professor Birch went to pick him up, but he should be back soon. You wait for him in the laboratory now. Hearing the words of the professor's assistant, Maen knew the reason, and then watched the door of the laboratory open. Maen also walked in, intending to wait for the professor to come back in the laboratory. 20 minutes later, Maen sat on the sofa, stomping his feet faster and faster, feeling a little strange. After all, Professor Birch should have come back after picking someone up. The assistant next to him also noticed Maen's appearance, and his expression was a little anxious, so he went to call and try to contact the professor. The call was quickly connected, but Professor Birch on the other end of the phone was probably in a bad condition. Not only was he panting, but his voice was also very urgent, and you could hear the screams of a child. Ahem, I'm in trouble here, and I can't go back to the laboratory until later. After that, Professor Birch hung up the phone, and the assistant held the phone in his hand, looking at Maen with a somewhat embarrassed expression. Maen also sighed slightly, then stood up from the sofa and said, "I'll go find Professor Birch. But Mr. Maen, the area around Little Root Town is very large, so it may be difficult to find. No, I have roughly guessed where Professor Birch is." After Maen finished speaking, he pointed to the forest in the distance outside the window, where a group of Pidgey flew out of the forest, and the Pokémon's roar growl could be faintly heard. On the other side, in the forest just pointed out by Maen, Professor Birch was fleeing in the forest with 2 children, and a Rhyhorn behind him was chasing the 3 people with rage. Professor Birch deliberately fell behind to cover the rear, allowing the 2 children to run in front. Fortunately, the physical fitness of people in the Pokémon world is not bad. Otherwise, such a small child would definitely not be able to run so far. However, Rhyhorn's figure was getting closer and closer, and Professor Birch finally gritted his teeth and planned to attract Rhyhorn away by himself to buy time for the 2 children to escape. Gungar, Shadow Ball. At this time, the 3 heard a voice, and then a shadow ball flew out of the forest and hit Rhyhorn, causing the Rhyhorn to fall to the ground and lose his ability to fight. Seeing Rhyhorn fall, Odaki and the other 2 breathed a sigh of relief, and then looked in the direction where the shadow ball was launched just now. Maen also walked out slowly, and next to him was Jengar with a smirk on his face. Seeing Maen, Professor Birch looked at him carefully, and then showed a surprised expression on his face and said, "Oh, you are Maen? Ha ha ha. I didn't expect you to be here. I'm sorry to keep you waiting for so long, and I'm sorry to bother you to save us. It's because Professor Birch insisted on touching the horn of Rhyhorn. Otherwise, how could you encounter this situation?" A child wearing green clothes and glasses next to him couldn't help but complain. Stephanie, who was wearing a headscarf behind the child, gently patted the child's head and said, "But wasn't Rhyhorn the one you wanted to see first?" Hearing his sister's words, the child with glasses also showed an embarrassed expression on his face. Maen looked at the interaction between the siblings and knew that the 2 were Mei and Xiao Sheng, but like Ash, they were not yet the age in the plot. Odaki Laboratory. After returning to the laboratory, Professor Birch also breathed a sigh of relief and then thanked Maen again. "Maen, Professor Oak told me the story of that Pokémon. Call out now so that I can give it a detailed examination." Professor Birch knew the story of Darkrai after receiving Professor Oak's request. He was a Pokémon lover and was extremely rage after hearing this, but then he sympathized with Darkrai, so he also hoped to help Darkrai as soon as possible. Maen heard what Professor Birch said, and he did not hesitate to call Darkrai out directly. Then, in the surprised eyes of everyone, Darkrai slowly emerged from under Maen's shadow. After Maen recovered Darkrai, he did not put Darkrai in the Pokeball because Maen did not want Darkrai to feel restrained. After all, the Pokeball would still feel restrained, which was okay for ordinary Pokemon, but a little uncomfortable for Darkrai. When Darkrai appeared, the most surprised person was not others, but Xiaosheng, who was standing beside him. After all, he had loved studying Pokemon since he was a child and had a lot of knowledge about Pokemon. Chapter 59 Trainer School and Darkrai's Qualifications. Darkrai. Xiaosheng shouted in shock the moment he saw Darkrai, and then he found that other people's eyes were on him, so he quickly covered his mouth and showed an embarrassed expression on his face. For Xiaosheng, who likes Pokemon and has rich knowledge of Pokemon, the Phantom Pokemon Darkrai is one of the first Pokemon he knows. Because children's minds are very easy to guess, and Xiaosheng is a boy, he must like those powerful and handsome Pokemon, such as mythical beasts or Phantom Pokemon. So Darkrai is one of the first Pokemon he knows, but phantom Pokemon is very rare, and it is impossible to see it normally. You can only identify it by looking at the picture. This is why Xiaosheng was so excited when he saw Darkrai. Others guessed what Xiaosheng was thinking when they saw his look, so they all smiled knowingly. After all, everyone was a child, and they understood why Xiaosheng was excited, and they didn't blame him. Darkrai, Professor Birch will give you a detailed examination in a while. Don't be afraid of those instruments. This time it will help you. Believe me. Okay, Maen, I believe you. Darkrai has been staying in Maen's shadow, and he knows that Maen did this for his own good. He has been observing the outside world in Maen's shadow all the way. He found that the outside world has really changed a lot, especially the relationship between Pokemon and humans has really changed a lot. In his time, Pokemon and humans fought each other, but now they have begun to live in harmony. The harmonious and friendly scene between humans and Pokemon also made his heart, which has been tortured for many years, feel warm. And Darkrai had seen what Professor Birch did before. From his instinctive action of standing behind the child to lead the Pokemon away, he knew that Professor Birch was not a bad person, so he did not resist the inspection. As Darkrai and Professor Birch went inside to check, Maen also sat on the sofa, with a smile on his face, looking at Xiaosheng and Mei who were hesitant to speak beside him. "What's up, little friends? Ask whatever you want to ask." Hearing Maen's words, Mei and Xiaosheng all excitedly came to Maen and said in unison, "Big brother, are you a trainer?" "Yes, yes." Hearing Maen's answer, both of them showed envious expressions. After all, their dream is to become an excellent trainer. After that, the two asked Maen many questions at once. Thanks to Maen's good impression of them in the animation, Maen also answered their questions one by one, until the two siblings disagreed on another issue. "Brother Maen, what do you think Pokemon trainers should rely on in battle?" "Nonsense. Of course it depends on rich knowledge." "No, it should depend on the tacit understanding and battle experience between trainers and Pokemon." Looking at Xiaosheng and Mei with their heads butted together, Maen also showed a helpless expression on his face. The issue they were arguing about is actually a problem that has been entangled in the Pokemon world. The academic school that controls knowledge and the practical school that is familiar with field battles, the quarrels between the two factions in the Pokemon world have never been heard. For example, the future Kanto elite Lorelei that Maen knows and the Sinnoh champion Cynthia are representatives of the academic school. Both of them first learned a wealth of Pokemon knowledge before starting field training, and Cynthia even became a historian of the Sinnoh region. And Maen's grandmother Agatha Elite and Drake Elite met on the SS and are representatives of the practical school. People of their generation have been fighting since they were young. Reading is not their specialty at all, but their rich battle experience has allowed them to kill all the way to the status of elite. In fact, in Maen's view, whether it is the academic school or the practical school, in the end, they must combine theory with knowledge to become a powerful trainer. There are many people in the academic school who understand Pokemon knowledge, but know nothing about fighting, such as Xiaosheng in front of Maen. Ash, who is a master of reverse attribute, is a complete negative example of the practical school. If it weren't for the protagonist Halo, normal people would rush out to explore the wild with only passion and basically return with blood on their heads. Maen was relieved to see the two little guys in front of him arguing more and more fiercely and completely forgetting his existence. After all, he didn't want to explain this kind of problem. It was up to the trainer to understand it himself. Just at this time, the door of the laboratory opened, and Professor Birch and Darkrai also walked out from the facade. Seeing Professor Birch coming out, Maen also sat up from the sofa and hurried to Professor Birch to ask about the situation. Mei and Xiaosheng, who were arguing next to them, also stopped and waited for Professor Birch's answer together. Professor Birch saw the anxious expression on Maen's face and comforted Maen not to panic, then said, "Maen, don't worry. Although Darkrai's condition is not good, it is not too bad. Although it has a lot of hidden injuries, its own foundation has not been destroyed. These assassinations can also be cured, but it requires a lot of resources and time. However, if you can get the top-level Dark Attribute treasure, you can speed up Darkrai's recovery. In short, Returning to the peak contest condition is not a difficult thing. This is Darkray's detailed information. You can take a good look at it. Maen took the information from Professor Birch and looked through it carefully. Name, Darkray attribute. Evil ability, Nightmare. Pokemon in the sleeping contest condition will receive additional damage. Gender, male. This has been modified. Darkray was originally supposed to be genderless. Moves, Ominous Wind, Hypnosis, Shadow Ball, Dark Void, Omitted Strength. Elite Primary, Temporary, Qualification. Unknown Maen was not surprised to see Darkray's information. Darkray's original strength should have been Elite Advanced, and he was one step away from the champion, but due to the long-term extraction of its energy, imprisonment, and hidden injuries, its strength inevitably declined. Maen was mentally prepared for these, but he was still a little surprised that the qualification showed unknown. Hearing Maen's doubts, Professor Birch also patiently explained to Maen. Chapter 60, Goodbye, Stephen, and the Megastone Collection Alliance has clearly divided the qualifications of Pokemon, but this only applies to 90% of Pokemon, and many of them are not included in this range. Because the lifespan of some mythical Pokemon and some mythical Pokemon is too long, these Pokemon can live for thousands of years as long as their energy is not exhausted. And 1,000 years is too long. No one knows what these Pokemon will experience in the meantime. And some Pokemon may greatly increase the strength of some Pokemon and break through their own limitations. So for this kind of Pokemon, the qualifications that Alliance has always set are unknown, and the unknown represents infinite possibilities. Maen's Darkray belongs to the above-mentioned mythical Pokemon. After hearing Professor Birch's words, Maen also understood the meaning of unknown. He thought of the Darkray in Bayong Town, who had lived for an unknown period of time and could even fight against Dialga and Palkia. Such strength was definitely not just an elite-level Pokemon. At least it had to be a champion level, or even the top of the champion level, and would soon enter the level of a leader, which was the same strength as a legendary beast. After figuring out Darkray's physical contest condition, Maen thanked Professor Birch. After 507, he left a sentence in Mei and Xiao Sheng's ears. The future belongs to you young trainers, and left the laboratory in the eyes of Mei and Xiao Sheng, who were reluctant to leave. However, Professor Birch looked a little strange when he heard Maen's words. He felt that Maen was really a black-bellied kid. How old was he? And he actually used such words to deceive these kids, who were obviously of the same generation. With Darkray, Maen would probably become Kantos in less than 2 years. Elite, by then these two naive children will have just started traveling. What kind of future is for young people? After leaving the laboratory, Maen did not leave the Hoenn region, but came to the nearest Petalburg city. Maen came here for no special purpose, but because he still needed to contact Stephen to deal with the treasure of Red Jack. As a result, Stephen, who received Maen's call, told Maen to wait for him in Petalburg city, and he happened to be dealing with things nearby. Not long after, Maen, who was sitting on a chair at the agreed location, heard the sound of a car. Then a luxurious car, Fee, stopped in front of Maen. The window rolled down, and Maen saw Stephen with a long face. After Maen opened the door and got in the car started again and started to drive. Why, Stephen, didn't you go to dig stones this time? Ahem, I have a deal with some company matters. I just came here today to talk to Norman Jim about something. I just heard that you had something to ask me, so I came to pick you up. Maen then remembered that the stone maniac in front of him was not just an ordinary enthusiast, but also the successor of Duin Group, so he still had to deal with some company business. So where are we going now? To a villa outside Petalburg City, just in time to talk about the pirate treasure you mentioned before, and the stones you asked me to collect before have also made some progress, so I have to communicate with you, my partner, about the progress of the work. Stephen finished speaking, looking at Maen with a teasing expression on his face. Maen was also a little embarrassed by Stephen's teasing expression. After all, Maen patted his butt and handed over all the Megastone collection to Stephen. After such a long time, he didn't even ask once. The car drove quickly, and the two chatted about their recent experiences and soon arrived at Stephen's villa. After entering the villa, the two sat on the sofa. Maen handed the treasure map of Red Jack to Stephen. Stephen just glanced at it briefly, and then handed the map to the maid behind him. Then he took out the phone from his pocket and dialed the number. Stephen, there's a treasure on the treasure map that needs you to deal with later. Add a few more ships. That's it. After Stephen finished these words, he hung up the phone casually and then said to Maen with a smile, "Okay, the treasure matter is dealt with. I will transfer the money to you after the sale. Do you need to pay you some money in advance?" Ahem, no need. Maen looked at Stephen's attitude of handling the treasure with such ease and could only sigh that he was indeed a man with a mind at home, and he could get it done in less than 10 phone calls. Then let's talk about the stones we collected before. Although Duin Company has been collecting them with all its strength during this period, I also remembered what you said when I was collecting them, not to let too many people know, so we only collected about 6 stones during this period, Stephen said, while taking out a few photos from his arms, and the photos were naturally the 6 megastones collected. Maen was a little surprised when he heard Stephen's words. You know, it has been less than a month since Maen and Stephen separated in MT Moon, and they have already collected 6 stones. You have to sigh at the strength of Duin Group. Stephen saw Maen's expression and knew that he had misunderstood and hurriedly explained, "Maen, don't hold too much hope. It's only because it was just collected that it was particularly simple, so we can collect so many in such a short time. Subsequent collection will only become more and more difficult." Maen nodded after hearing it with sudden enlightenment. "So, Maen, maybe my question is a bit too much, but I hope you can tell me what this stone is used for. As a friend, I will naturally fully support you, but as the heir of Devon Company, I also hope to be responsible for the company." Maen was not surprised to hear Stephen's serious words, because he also guessed that Stephen would ask this question sooner or later. After all, Maen and Stephen were just friends. The other party could collect without asking anything just by listening to Maen's words, and Maen was also considered a partner and could use these megastones for free. Whether from the perspective of friends or business, Stephen has done his best. After a pause, Maen looked at Stephen with a very serious look. Stephen knew that the matter was serious when he saw Maen's eyes, and then asked the staff of the villa not to follow him for the time being, and took Maen into the study. "Maen, this is my private study. There is absolutely no possibility of any eavesdropping. You can speak now. Stephen, do you believe that Pokemon has another way to evolve besides normal evolution? I'm not talking about the kind that uses evolution stones, but the short-term evolution with a time limit, evolving into another form." Maen's tone was firm, and Stephen on the other side couldn't help shrinking his pupils when he heard Maen's words. Chapter 61 Mega Jengar in this era. Alliance has never stopped researching the evolution of Pokemon. So far, various ways of evolution have been discovered by professors and researchers in various regions. In addition to normal evolution, other ways of evolution, such as carrying evolution stones and intimacy, have also been discovered. But no matter which way of evolution it is, it will permanently change the form and strength of Pokemon. When Maen heard that this stone could develop a new way of evolution, which was completely different from the usual cognition, Stephen's first reaction was to disbelieve it. Maen naturally saw Stephen's eyes, and then sorted out the voice to explain. "Stephen, you should know that I usually like to read some books and explore ancient sites." Maen couldn't say that he was reborn through time travel, so he made up a reason to explain to Stephen. Stephen on the other side was stunned when he heard Maen's explanation, and then looked at Maen in surprise, knowing that the other party meant to really see the form of Pokemon after evolution, so he could make such a conclusion. "And as far as I know, there's a laboratory in Kalos region that is researching this stone." After Stephen heard what Maen said, he believed it even more, because when Devon Company was collecting stones, it did find out that there was indeed a laboratory in Kalos region that was researching this stone, but there has been no results released, and it has just started researching. Maen also told Stephen some of the Pokemon that he knew could be Mega Evolved, especially when he heard that Metagross could be Mega Evolved. Stephen's eyes obviously flashed with excitement. Seeing Stephen's eyes, Maen knew that the other party completely trusted him. And then Maen also gave Stephen the picture of the keystone, telling Stephen that this thing was needed to truly complete Mega Evolution. Last time at MT Moon, Maen did not tell Stephen about the keystone, but only about the Megastone. There was no other reason for doing so, just because Maen was too excited at the time and forgot. When Stephen saw the picture of the keystone drawn by Maen, a thoughtful expression appeared on his face, and then he became weird. Maen, I seem to have this keystone. This time it was Maen's turn to be surprised. He didn't expect Stephen to have a keystone in his hand. Stephen saw Maen's expression and explained, "This stone is pretty, so I once collected two for collection purposes. I will have someone send the keystone and the previous evolution stone together." Maen hurriedly said yes when he heard Stephen's words. Maybe today is the day when Mega Evolution will reappear. Since Stephen gave an emergency order, the keystone and the previously collected megastones were delivered in less than an hour, and then placed on the table together with the megastone in Maen's hand. Now there are a total of 7 Mega Evolution stones and 2 keystones on the table, and the conditions for Mega Evolution have been fully met. Then Maen asked Jengar to come out of the shadows to see which Mega Stone on the table Jengar could feel. On the other side, Stephen also released Metagross, who had evolved not long ago, to sense the Mega Stone on the table together. Jengar came to the table after hearing Maen's words, and then looked at the stone on the table. Soon, Jengar's expression changed. It instinctively picked up a Mega Stone from the table, and then shouted excitedly to Maen. However, Stephen's Metagross didn't react, and finally shook his head helplessly at Stephen. Stephen was a little disappointed when he saw that his Metagross didn't sense the Megastone that suited him, but it soon disappeared, and then he comforted his Metagross. Although he didn't find Metagross's Megastone, it was enough to see Maen's Mega Evolution. Maen picked up one of the 2 keystones on the table, and then saw Stephen's eyes, knowing that he would not be able to leave if he didn't show his Mega Evolution today. The 3 major elements of Mega Evolution are Keystone, Mega Evolution Stone, and the state of mind-to-mind communication between trainer and Pokemon. Now all the elements are met. Maen holds the Keystone in his hand, and Jengar on the other side also swallows the Mega Stone into his stomach. "Please give me flowers, Ma," and concentrated his energy and began to try to communicate with the keystone in his hand. As Maen's celestial power continued to flow in, the keystone began to release colorful light. At this moment, Maen suddenly found that his consciousness seemed to have left his body and came to Jengar's side. Jengar seemed to sense Maen's spirit, and the Mega Stone in his body began to brighten, and his power continued to rise. Jengar, Mega Evolution. When Maen and Jengar's consciousness communicated most closely, Maen could sense the opportunity for evolution. As Jengar's body began to emit the light of evolution, Stephen on the other side could not hide the excitement on his face at all, because he was a witness to this evolution. The light of evolution dissipated, and Jengar's form changed again. Jengar, who originally stood on his legs, changed to standing on his body after Mega Evolution. Because Maen's Jengar was originally pure dark, the lower body of the Mega evolved Jengar was not purple-red, but the same black as the body, and it looked like the limbs had penetrated into the floor under his feet. But Maen knew that this was not penetration, but that the body of Mega Jengar could connect to the other dimension and lurk in the other dimension to attack. Maen's Jengar was gym level before evolution, and after evolution, it directly broke through to the strength of quasi-elite close to elite. Although it was only a temporary situation, it also proved the power of Mega Evolution. 012310525 Filu 112581551. Mega Jengar also curiously moved his new body, constantly moving among the various furniture in the study. On the other side, Maen began to feel a little tired after about 5 minutes, and instinctively used the dark power in his body. Later, Maen was surprised to find that the dark power could calm his mind and prolong the time of Mega Evolution. This discovery shocked Maen, but he still canceled Jengar's Mega Evolution and let Jengar return to his original appearance. Chapter 62. Pokemon Researcher and Thief on the other side. Stephen saw that Maen had canceled the Mega Evolution and thought of what Maen had said before. Although the Mega Evolution is powerful, it also consumes a lot of trainer celestial power. In Stephen's opinion, Maen canceled the Mega Evolution because his mental consumption reached the critical value. Maen shook his hand to stop Stephen from wanting to help him. If Stephen was replaced by Sabrina, then Maen might need a hand. After seeing the mega evolution, Stephen also understood the true value of this mega stone, and then looked at Maen, who was sitting opposite pretending to recover his spirit, and slowly said, Maen, there are two ways to deal with megastones now. The first is our previous plan, not to make it public, and then collect a large amount of megastones as soon as possible, 857, so that even if we don't use it in the future, we can use it to exchange for a large amount of resources back. Maen nodded when he heard Stephen's words, and then asked what the second way was. The second is to announce the news of mega evolution right now, but it is not a simple announcement. You need to write a paper and then publish it jointly with Devon. The benefit of doing so is that it will greatly help you and our Devon's reputation. Our Devon can use this to improve its reputation among the people and trainers, which will be of great help to the development of the company. And you, Maen, can use this to try to get the identity of a Pokemon researcher, which will also be beneficial to your future development. Maen understood both of Stephen's plans, especially the second plan, which made Maen have to admire Stephen's idea and think of this way. The second way seems that the identity of a Pokemon researcher does not seem to be as profitable as the first one, which is a lot of money, but Maen knows that a Pokemon researcher is not an ordinary identity. In the Pokemon world, the first requirement to become a Pokemon researcher is that you must make contributions or participate in various studies on Pokemon published in order to obtain the qualification of a researcher. Professor Birch's assistant, whom Maen met at Professor Birch before, worked in a laboratory, but he was still not a researcher. Only with Professor Birch and research together and achieve results before they can truly become researchers. It is already difficult to obtain the status of a researcher, and it is even more difficult to maintain the status of a researcher. New research results must be published again within 3 years. Otherwise, the researcher status will be revoked. As for the status of professor, it is even more difficult. 3 Pokemon research reports with major discoveries must be produced within 10 years to become a professor. 3 may not seem like a lot, but which Pokemon research is not calculated in years. The 10-year limit has already isolated 80% of researchers from becoming professors. But the qualification of a researcher is not just a title. Researchers can apply to the Alliance for approval to build their own laboratory and can also read various books and materials within the Alliance. There are also various basic benefits, and the reputation among the people has also been greatly improved. Maen was also somewhat tempted by the status of a researcher, but suddenly thought of his grandmother's attitude towards Professor Oak, and suddenly felt cold all over, thinking that if he really did this, he would probably be beaten. Stephen also noticed Maen's concerns and made suggestions to Maen. We could still go all out to collect Mega Evolution Stones in the next month, because I guess the remaining month is probably the easiest time to collect them, and there will probably be no such stones on the market after that. If Kalos has not released the results, Maen, you could try to publish them to try to obtain the status of a researcher. Stephen's words are the best choice for Maen. As for Kalos' laboratory, Inwu and Maen tacitly did not mention it. After all, although Stephen is a good person, he also represents Dew & Company, so he naturally has to consider the interests of the company. Moreover, although they belong to the same alliance, it does not mean that Stephen treats all regions equally. Basketball and football are divided into city teams, not to mention the alliance region. There is competition between regions, and compared to the unfamiliar Kalos region, Stephen thinks it is better to cooperate with his friend Maen and the neighboring region. Maen nodded after hearing Stephen's words, and then agreed to Stephen's suggestion. After Stephen talked with Maen for a few more words, he answered a phone call and left the villa. After all, he was very busy as the heir of the company, and he had to preside over the acquisition plan of Megastone later. The villa was left to Maen by Stephen. Knowing that Maen didn't like crowded environments, he also evacuated all the staff inside. Maen saw that it was getting late, so he didn't plan to return to the Pokemon Center in the city, and decided to stay in Stephen's villa. At dinner, after Maen and the Pokemon had dinner, Maen began to make energy blocks for them as snacks, while Jengar, Zweilous, and Darkrai played with Lapras in the swimming pool downstairs. Especially, Jengar got a few parasols and lounge chairs from somewhere and placed them by the swimming pool. He also put on a pair of sunglasses and a table with a small TV playing TV programs. Maen looked outside and saw that the moon had come out. He didn't know what Jengar meant by this. Maybe it was just a 0-8 form. While waiting for the energy cubes to finally solidify, Maen decided to take a shower first, and then give them a meal after returning and rest. After Maen entered the bathroom, a pair of orange-red eyes slowly emerged in the dark shadows, and then curiously looked at the energy cubes solidifying in the machine on the table. Maen, on the other side, quickly finished his shower, wiped his head with a towel in his bathrobe, and slowly walked back to the table, intending to take out the solidified energy cubes. Then Maen was surprised to find out, "Where's my energy cube? Where is my huge energy cube?" Looking at the empty machine, Maen was puzzled and immediately turned his attention to Jengar, who was lying on the pool chair outside. Chapter 63. Marshadao. At the pool, Zweilous was swimming with his sister Lapras, while Jengar was wearing sunglasses and lying on his back in a chair, looking like a boss. Darkrai was watching the TV program on the table intently. After all, for it, who had been imprisoned for hundreds of years, these novel things were ways for it to better understand the present era. Maen came to the pool in a bathrobe, then gently tapped Jengar's head with his finger and said helplessly, "Okay, Jengar, stop pretending to be a boss. Give me the energy cube. This is for you and them to have a snack." Jengar, who was wearing sunglasses, took off his sunglasses, showing a puzzled look, as if he was saying what? "Jengar, your acting skills have improved. You can even act out such an innocent expression. It seems that you may become a Pokemon actor in the future." Jengar was even more confused when he heard Maen's words, and then he thought that Maen seemed to think that it took the energy cube and ate it secretly. This is slander. This is discrimination. This is distrust. 25. This is hurting. Go away, go away. Maen couldn't help but reach out and hold Jengar's head to stop Jengar's verbal attack. However, seeing Jengar's angry expression, Maen knew that he seemed to have wronged Jengar, because although Jengar was playful and greedy, he had never lied. And Zweilous next to him also proved that Jengar had never left the swimming pool, proving that the energy cube was indeed not taken by Jengar. Looking at Jengar with his arms folded in front of his chest and white smoke constantly coming out of his head, Maen smiled and apologized, and finally got Jengar's forgiveness after agreeing to compensate Jengar for some mental damages. But the energy cube cannot disappear out of thin air, which means that there should be other ones in Steven's Villa Pokemon, and can evade the detection of Maen and his Pokemon without anyone noticing, which shows that this Pokemon is quite powerful. Moreover, Maen's energy cube is the favorite flavor of Ghost and Dark Pokemon, which excludes the possibility of Psychic Pokemon committing the crime. On the other side, Jengar also rushed into the villa and began to look for the criminal. After all, it suffered such a great injustice, and Jengar must find this thief to calm his anger. However, after Maen and Jengar and other Pokemon searched the entire villa, they did not find the thief Pokemon who took the energy cube. Looking at the angry Jengar, Maen winked at Jengar gently and then said loudly, "Since you are there, there is no way. I will make another one." As he said, Maen started to operate the machine and started the second production. Soon the energy cube was about to be completed, and only the final solidification stage was left. "Jengar, let's go to the swimming pool to play for a while. After all, Lapras as their Pokemon is not good either. We will come back to get it after it solidifies." While Maen was speaking, he and other Pokemon also used colors, and then walked out of the room together. As Maen's footsteps gradually faded away, in a shadow in the corner, the familiar orange eyes slowly emerge again. After carefully looking around and not hearing Maen's footsteps, this Pokemon gently moved to the energy cube machine, stretched out his little hand to press the button of the machine, take out the energy cube inside. At this moment, the door opened again, and the owner of the little hand was also startled by the sound and looked towards the direction of the door. And the one who opened the door was Maen, who had just pretended to leave. After leaving the villa, Maen lay on Jengar's back and quietly flew back, waiting for the thief inside to act again. The color he used before was also to make Jengar and the others cooperate with him. But compared to the frightened thief, the expression on Maen's face was more surprised, because he recognized the identity of thief at a glance, the phantom Maen Marshadao. And after the surprise, the first to act was Marshadao instinctively wanted to get back into the shadow. Seeing Marshadao trying to escape, Maen did not hesitate and directly ordered Jengar and Darkrai to stop Marshadao from escaping. Then Maen saw Marshadao's figure get into the shadow, and Jengar and Darkrai followed into the shadow. Then Maen heard Pokmon's growl and various collision sounds coming from all over the room. Then Maen saw Marshadao's figure appear again, but this time it was still in the corner of the room, and Jengar and Darkrai surrounded it in the corner. Seeing this situation, Maen also came over excitedly, standing with Jengar and Darkrai, looking at Margindo leaning against the wall in the corner. A tall trainer and two Pokemon with haze all over their bodies blocked a cute Pokemon in the corner. Coupled with Maen's smile, if this scene was seen by outsiders, they would definitely think that Maen was not a good person and looked like a villain. But the actual situation is that Marshado's strength is completely better than those present Pokemon are all strong. And the reason why Marshadao did not resist but fled is because Pokemon like Marshadao are instinctively very timid, and 117 plus being caught in the act of crime, Marshadao instinctively chose to run away first. Looking at Maen and two Pokemon surrounding him, Marshadao kept saying in his heart, "I'm sorry, Lord Ho-Oh. As an envoy, I'm afraid I have to end my Pokemon's life today." However, Marshadao, who had his eyes tightly closed, did not wait for the expected attack, but felt as if his head was being gently stroked. Marshadao slowly opened his eyes and saw Maen in front of him gently touching his head with his hand. At the same time, there was a particularly friendly breath coming from Maen. The most important thing was that Marshadao felt very comfortable under Maen's touch and completely relaxed. After seeing that Marshadao relaxed and had no intention of escaping, Maen also called Jengar to bring the energy cube over. He took out one and put it in front of Marshadao. The energy cube you ate before should be an energy cube that was not completely solidified. It must taste worse than this one. Try this one. Marshadao heard Maen's words, smelled the wonderful smell of the energy cube in front of him, and couldn't help but stretch out his little hand, took the energy cube in his hand, and then stuffed it into his mouth. Chapter 64, Rainbow Warrior Trial. Maen looked at Marshadao, whose eyes were narrowed into slits, with a surprised expression on his face. He didn't know why Marshadao appeared here. In the animation, Marshadao appeared as a messenger for Ho-Oh, but now he appeared here, making Maen wonder if he also had the potential to become a rainbow warrior. In addition, is it possible that this is another Marshadao, not the one from Ho-Oh? Then can he seduce this Marshadao? Thinking of this, Maen also showed an expectant expression on his face. On the other side, Marshadao was still immersed in the deliciousness of the energy cube. Sure enough, this kind of prepared energy cube was much more delicious than the one it had taken from the machine before. At this time, Marshadao also heard Maen's question and began to explain slowly. Listening to Marshadao's explanation, coupled with Darkray's translation, Maen gradually understood why Marshadao came here. It turned out that when he fought with Sabrina before, Maen released excessive dark power, and this power was also sensed by Marshadao, so he followed the trace of power all the way here. After confirming that Maen was the master of power, the timid Marshadao had not dared to show up. Finally, today, after he couldn't help but captivate the energy cube, he secretly showed up and was caught by Maen. Maen showed a disappointed expression on his face after hearing that Marshadao was the messenger of Ho-Oh. In this case, Maen's plan to regain Marshadao would fail. After all, Marshadao was the messenger of Ho-Oh. If Marshadao really took action, Ho-Oh would have to come to Maen in person to talk. Now he couldn't offend such a big guy, and even if he succeeded in regaining Marshadao, it was not certain whether Marshadao was willing to recognize him as a trainer. After all, although he made a good impression on Earl Dervish of Marshadao, it did not mean that he could force his will. However, if he could not regain Marshadao, it did not mean that he could not make friends with him. It was also good to leave a good impression on Marshadao. In case Marcia Dao was laid off in the future, wouldn't Maine be a good place for Marcia Dao to find a job again? On the other side, Marcia Dao was like a little scumbag. After eating and drinking, he was embarrassed to say goodbye to Maine. After all, the source of the dark power was found before, and he had a good meal. As a messenger of Ho-Oh, he had to go back. Maine did not force him to stay, but took Marcia Dao out of the villa and prepared to send Marcia Dao away. However, when Maen took Marcia Dao out of the villa, Maen suddenly found that the fog had begun to fill the outside, and dark clouds appeared in the sky. However, in such a strange weather environment, Maen actually felt that the temperature around him not only did not drop, but was a little warm. Marcia Dao's face suddenly showed a panic expression, and then he said goodbye to Maen in a panic and planned to get into the shadow and leave here. However, Marcia Dao was still a step slower, and the figures of 3 Pokemon gradually appeared in the fog. These 3 Pokemon were Suicune, Raikou, and Entei. The 3 Pokemon naturally discovered Marcia Dao, who was trying to escape underground. And after being discovered, Marcia Dao sat down on the ground with a look of complete failure, which made Maen next to him look puzzled. Rainbow Hero, since you have been chosen by Ho-Oh and the Messenger, are you ready to accept the trial of Ho-Oh? A refreshing male voice suddenly came to Maen's ears, and then he judged the owner of the voice from the voice, Suicune, standing in the middle. But Maen found that he could understand every word of Suicune, but why couldn't he understand it when it was connected into a sentence? Trial? What trial? Hearing the conversation between Maen and Suicune, Marcia Dao was lying on his back on the ground, looking like a salted fish, and kept saying, Marcia and Marcia. In his mouth, Suicune's 3 Pokemon were also a little confused when they heard Maen's doubts. But as messengers, they still told Maen to take out the Ho-Oh feather, and he would understand. Ho-Oh feather? I don't have that thing. Now the 3 Pokemon of Suicune were also confused. They just found that Marcia Dao, the messenger of Ho-Oh, had left far away and came to Ho and thought he had found the Rainbow Warrior. But he never expected that Maen, who was regarded as the Rainbow Warrior, did not have the Ho-Oh feather. What was Marcia Dao doing here? Suicune dragged Marcia Dao's body in front of him with the breeze, and then the 3 Pokemon looked at the salted fish normal Marcia Dao together, waiting for its explanation. And Maen couldn't help but take a picture of this scene with Pokédex. After all, it's rare to see the scene of the big guys holding a meeting. These guys are real big guys. These 3 Pokemon are real members of the Ho-Oh Guard and also inspectors of the Rainbow Messenger. Unlike the Suicune that was caught in a net, these 3 should be the 3 Pokemon resurrected by Ho-Oh, and they're the Pokemon that truly inherited part of Ho-Oh's priesthood. Suicune and the others finally figured out the reason why Marcia Dao came here, and the expressions on their faces were also extremely embarrassed. They never expected that such a big mistake would happen. And the 3 of them were also caused by this mistake to come from the Johto region. Hoenn was completely confused. These are not the most important things. The most important thing is that this incident really embarrassed Lord Ho-Oh. If this gets out, how will the trainers outside view the trial? Ho-Oh's messenger was actually captivated by being ordered to eat. It will make people doubt whether this kind of trial, good money and good, is really reliable. However, in front of Maen, the 3 Pokemon Suicune didn't want to say anything else. After all, it was too embarrassing for Pokemon. Maen saw that several Pokemon were about to leave, so he stopped them first, and then took out some energy cubes from Jengar's stomach and gave them to Kaishui to look at them. Some of these energy cubes were bought, and some were made privately. After all, there was a Lapras in the family. Although he didn't fight, Maen would not fall behind in the training resources. So he also made energy cube formulas of various systems to make them, but they were all of intermediate quality, which could not compare with the high-level energy cube secret recipes obtained from Alliance. Suicune and the others naturally wouldn't suspect that Marcia Dao was up to something bad. After all, although Marcia Dao was captivated, not everyone could be recognized by Marcia Dao, so at least Marcia Dao's character could be guaranteed. Chapter 65. The Black and Ho-Oh feather. Maen naturally had no intention of retrieving Suicune and the others. After all, he was not a one-ball Superman who could directly retrieving them with a Pokeball. What he wanted more was to make friends with these legendary beasts and strive to become a legendary beast PY master in the Pokemon world. Just as Suicune and several Pokemon thanked Maen and were about to leave, they suddenly sensed something and all looked up at soaring in the sky. Maen also looked up at soaring in the sky and then saw a scene that he would never forget in his life. Ho-Oh appeared. Ho-Oh dragged a long tail and flew through the night, soaring in the sky with rainbow light on his body, and sprinkled rainbow light while passing by Maen's sky. One of the rainbow lights fell into Maen's shadow. The rainbow light entered the body of Maen's Pokemon, and Jengar and the others all showed a comfortable expression and closed their eyes. Darkrai emerged from the shadows. After the rainbow light entered his body, which was originally covered with many hidden injuries, suddenly felt warm. Most of the hidden injuries were slowly repaired, leaving only some serious hidden injuries, which were mostly recovered. And Darkrai's strength also rushed directly to the elite intermediate level, not far from the peak contest condition. 690. A rainbow light also fell in front of Maen. When the rainbow light dissipated, a Ho-Oh feather floated in front of Maen. Maen obtained the qualification of the Rainbow Warrior. After shedding the rainbow light, Ho-Oh disappeared into the night, as if normal had never appeared. Suicune and several Pokemon looked at Fly's Ho-Oh respectfully after seeing Ho-Oh appear, until Ho-Oh disappeared into the night sky. Now, Rainbow Warrior, you have obtained the qualification for the trial. Are you ready to accept the trial? Suicune's voice sounded again, this time with a friendly tone, unlike the previous formulaic tone. Maen looked at the Ho-Oh feather in front of him, with a firm expression on his face, and then grabbed the feather in his hand, deciding to accept this trial. But an accident happened. The moment Maen got the Ho-Oh feather, the color of the Ho-Oh feather instantly changed from colorful red light to ink-like black. Maen, Suicune, and other Pokemon. Maen looked at the black feather in his hand, and his expression on his face was also confused. He remembered that the feather turned black in the movie version, which meant that the trainer with evil thoughts in his heart would touch the feather. Isn't he a good person? Maen fell into self-doubt, shattered the child's dream of being a trainer, and then took away all the treasures of others secretly. I do seem to be a bit like a villain. No, I'm not a villain. I'm a righteous trainer. Maen shook his head, threw away the distracting thoughts in his heart, and then looked at the black feather in his hand. He suspected that it might be the influence of his dark power. On the other side, Suicune and the others were also dumbfounded. What should they do if the feathers turn black? Such an evil trainer should be disqualified as a hero, and Marshadao should have immediately taken action to defeat Maen. But the problem is that this feather was dropped by Ho-Oh in front of them. What does this mean? Is Lord Ho-Oh also presbyopic? Suicune, Marshadao, and other Pokemon suddenly had this thought in their minds, and then they immediately shook their heads to get rid of this thought. Lord Ho-Oh must have a deep meaning, that's right. Suicune and the other three Pokemon could only look at Marshadao because this situation is normally handled by Mardo. Marshadao was also a little confused. Logically, if the feathers of Ho-Oh were tainted, it must be dealt with a heavy punch. Physical heavy punch. But the reason why Marshadao, Kfek, did not take action was that it did not sense any evil aura from the Ho-Oh feather that had turned black from Maen's hand. There might be a little bit, but that was not enough to taint the Phoenix feather. Marshadao also told Suicune and the other three Pokemon what he saw. Suicune also looked at the Phoenix feather in Maen's hand, and indeed did not sense any strong evil aura, but still felt more from the power of Lord Ho-Oh. And although the color of the feather turned black, it still had a shining light flowing on it. And that luster was just like the black pearl normal, completely not tainted and emitting black evil. Maen slowly used the power of darkness to input it into the Phoenix feather, and indeed the black light on the feather became more obvious. And he also determined the reason for the feather's change. After Maen's explanation and the display of the power of darkness, Suicune and several Pokemon also understood the reason for Fengyu's change, and they breathed a sigh of relief. As expected, Lord Ho-Oh was not blinded by old age. Since you have accepted the trial officially begins. After sorting out his emotions, Suicune announced the start of the trial again. Maen also looked at Suicune expectantly, hoping to know the content of the next trial. Don't be so nervous. Ho-Oh's trial is not a battle, but a test of a person's heart. Heart. Yes, you have passed Suakun's trial. Maen was stunned when he heard Suakun's words. Didn't the trial just start? Suakun noticed Maen's doubts and explained, My trial is to see if the trainer has a sincere heart towards Pakmon. As one of the Ho-Oh guards, Suakun not only has the ability to purify water quality, but also has the ability to perceive the emotions of trainer and Pakmon. When it saw Maen, it discovered the relationship between Maen and his Pakmon, and also learned the story between it and Maen from Darkrai. So Maen naturally passed Suakun's trial. After Suakun's explanation, Maen also understood the meaning of the trial, and then looked at Reiku and Nei. We won't tell you the content of the trial. When you pass the trial, we will appear again. Looking forward to meeting you next time, Rainbow Hero. Suakun didn't say much, and disappeared in the thick fog with Reiku and Nei. But Maen knew that they would always observe Maen and pay attention to Maen's every move. When Maen completed the trial, they would appear again. Chapter 66 Lavaridge Town and Lava Team. Although Suakun and the other 3 Pakmon left, Marshadao stayed behind, because as the messenger of Ho-Oh, it could stay here with a clear conscience. Of course, it was not for free meals. Absolutely not. But as the messenger of Ho-Oh, Marshadao had the responsibility to observe the Rainbow Warrior. Naturally, Marshadao would not refuse. After all, although Marshadao told Marshadao that it would not help Marshadao in the battle, Marshadao believed that when his life was in danger, Marshadao would definitely help. It was just that there was another resident in his shadow. Now Jengar, Darkrai, and Marshadao were all hiding in Marshadao. Marshadao curiously asked the 3 Pakmon if it would be uncomfortable to squeeze in his shadow. As a result, the 3 Pakmon said that the space inside was large and comfortable. After hearing the answers of the 3 Pakmon, Marshadao stopped asking. This time, Maen didn't put the Ho-Oh feather in Jengar's stomach because Jengar said he couldn't eat it, and if he ate it, his stomach would probably explode. So Maen put the Ho-Oh feather close to his body, and then he found that the feather slowly absorbed his dark power, but the amount was not too much, so although Maen was curious, he just let the feather absorb it casually. No words were spoken that night. The next morning, Maen got up early to exercise with Pakmon and received a call from Steven. Maen, are you interested in digging meteorite? Meteorite? Where to go? Empty chimney in Lavaridge Town. How about it? Do you want to go? After hearing this, Maen felt that he had nothing to do anyway, and his Pakmon could also relax for a while. After all, they had been drifting on the sea after dealing with the pirates before, and it didn't matter if they took a rare break. So he accepted Steven's invitation. Not long after, Maen heard the sound of a car horn. It was the familiar luxury car from yesterday, which took Maen to the station directly, and then set off for Lavaridge Town. Although Lavaridge Town is only a small town in the Hoenn region, it is very famous in the Hoenn region. The reason why Lavaridge Town is famous is because it has the famous scenic spot Empty Chimney and the famous hot springs in the Hoenn region. Maen was not very interested in digging stones this time, but wanted to take his Pakmon to soak in the hot springs. After all, it was a rare leisure time, so he naturally had to experience the local customs and customs of the city. After arriving at Lavaridge Town, Steven, the stone maniac, hurried up the mountain after hearing that Maen was not going first, and gave Maen the address he was going to before leaving. On the other side, Maen led his Pakmon to the famous hot spring hotel in Lavaridge Town, booked a hot spring, and then took his Pakmon to relax. As his body sank into the hot spring, Maen couldn't help but let out a comfortable sound. Maen, who had lived 2 lives, was taking a hot spring bath for the first time today. The moment he entered the pool, he felt that all his fatigue was dispelled. Jengar and several Pakmon next to him also became like salted fish. Normal leaned against the edge of the pool, and the expression on his face was completely satisfied. Marshadow's whole body floated on the water, like a dried salted fish. Normal's orange eyes were completely narrowed. Maen also asked Jengar to take out the energy cubes he had prepared before and share them with everyone. He also ordered a lot of specialty food from the hotel service desk. Putting aside all worries, Maen and the Pokemon enjoyed the gift of hot springs. After enjoying it, Maen and the Pokemon put on their clothes and planned to go out for a walk. But when leaving, the owner of the hotel enthusiastically told Ma in a piece of news, "Guest, today is Laveridge, the town's monthly festival will be very lively in the evening, and there will be fireworks. Don't miss it." Hearing the boss words, Maen thought of the streets that seemed to be decorated with many festival items when he came here. Unexpectedly, there was an unexpected gain. After asking several Pokemon for their opinions, Maen unanimously decided to go for a walk together in the evening. Maen sensed the excitement of the Pokemons and smiled. After all, his Pokemon had not been born for too long and still retained the personality of a child. Even though Darkrai had lived for hundreds of years, he had been imprisoned for most of the time, and he was very yearning for the scenery outside. "Please give me flowers." Fortunately, Maen didn't have to wait too long. After soaking in the hot spring, the sky had actually darkened. Maen didn't wait long in the hotel before he heard the sound of fireworks, which also proved that the festival had officially begun. After leaving the hotel, Maen saw that the streets were indeed very lively, and the vendors on both sides began to do business. Maen walked and looked at the vendors around him, and could only sigh that it was built on most of the things sold in the town under the volcano are related to fire. There are various fire-type Pokemon pendants and dolls, as well as various exclusive souvenirs of Laveridge Town. Ma did not buy these things, but bought lava cookies, a specialty of Laveridge Town. The taste is a bit spicy, but the taste and texture are really good. Maen also bought a bag and threw it down when no one was paying attention. Before the bag of Sunbay fell to the ground, a chubby black hand caught the Sunbay and brought it to the shadow. At this time, two people came to Maen. These two people were wearing red coats and pants, and wearing red hoods with pointed corners on their heads. They hurriedly passed by Maen. In this festive atmosphere, coupled with being in Laveridge Town, most people were wearing red clothes, and because of the festive atmosphere, there were many unfamiliar faces, so the two people's dress did not attract people's attention at all. But Maen on the other side had a slight change of eyes, and then pretended to be a passerby, enjoying the festival, and continued to walk forward, without attracting the attention of the two people just now. After the two men walked away, Maen's expression became a little solemn, because other people did not recognize their attire, but Maen knew that the attire of the two men just now, and the expressions that were different from ordinary residents, proved that the two men belonged to one of the two largest dark organizations in the Hoenn region, the Lava Team. Chapter 67, The Purpose of the Lava Team. Maen looked at the members of the Magma Team going away, and his expression was a little speechless. He never dreamed that he would meet the Magma Team when he was on vacation. As for your saying that it would be fine if you just ignored it, then Maen had to mention the purpose of the Magma Team. Magma Team and Team Aqua belong to the two largest dark organizations in the Hoenn region. They can't be said to be working together, but they can only be said to be fighting to the death. The root cause lies in the completely opposite ideals between the two. One side intends to expand the area of the land, and the other side wants to let the ocean cover the continent. Then it involves the two great beasts of Hoenn, Kyogre and the flying Groudon. These two beasts have been fighting since ancient times. Every time they fight, they force Rayquaza in the sky to come down to mediate 140, then fall asleep and continue to fight, continue to mediate, and so on. Now the two beasts are in a dormant stage, and the current goal of Magma Team and Team Aqua is naturally to wake them up. So if the Magma Team showed up in Laveridge Town, it would prove that there was definitely something here that would be helpful in awakening Groudon. So unless Maen turned around and left Laveridge Town immediately, Laveridge Town would definitely become the center of the incident, because it was about Groudon and the Magma Team would never give up. But Maen couldn't leave now, because he had guessed what the Magma Team was looking for, probably the meteorite mentioned by Steven before, although he didn't remember it very well. Maen still remembered that the meteorite was indeed targeted by the Magma Team in the anime and games, but Maen always thought that such a thing would not appear until Ash's time, but he didn't expect it to happen earlier now. If Maen left like this, he would be a little sorry for his friend Steven, and if he mentioned this to Steven, who was a resident of the Hoenn region, would definitely go back to stop it. As a friend, Maen would definitely go to help him. It seems that I am destined to be a hard worker. Marn sighed softly and then called Stephen. Hearing the gentle voice of the young lady on the phone reminding Maen that there was no signal, Maen couldn't help but twitch his mouth and immediately guessed that Stephen must—
No more novels? Take part in the voting. The most requested novels and those with the most likes will be chosen for publication on euroaudiobooks.com. There, I can upload as much as I want without the risk of receiving a strike. Our 18 novels and other content that exceed what is morally acceptable are only published on Patreon or the free novels page. Remember, the site is funded by donations on Ko-fi and Patreon memberships.